Member Bennett?
Here.
Member Tesler? Absent. Member Nanke?
Here.
Member Clausen?
Here.
Member Dickey?
Here.
Member Thomas? Absent. Member Cannon?
Yes.
Member Clem?
Here.
Member Berger?
Here.
Member Kyloway?
Here.
Member Summers? Absent. Member George?
Here.
Member McEvely?
Here.
Member Strozit?
Here.
Member Motley?
Here.
Member Vick? Absent. Member Pruitt? Absent.
How long is this going to be tonight? I was wondering if it's going to be long.
Thank you. And we have a guest member tonight, do we not?
I'm David Fox. My business is in Ward 2, and Laura Tesler couldn't make it tonight and asked if I would stand in for her.
Thank you. And you're also a member of our Planning Commission, are you not? So, doing double duty. All right. And I'm sure that Member Fox, you understand that you're free to participate as a full member, except you cannot make motions or vote. But otherwise, ask questions and all that. In fact, since this is your one chance, I'm going to give you the honor of leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance, if you would.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do we have a motion on the minutes? The minutes of April 27th?
So moved, sir.
Member Motley, were you moving or making?
Yes, move to accept.
Okay, okay, it's been moved by Member Motley and seconded by Member Cannon to approve the April 27th minutes. Any corrections or discussion?
Just a bit of addition,
Oh. Would you mind restating your motion, Member Motley, to include the additions?
No. Excuse me. Point of clarification. The additions are to our agenda, not to the minutes from last meeting.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion on the floor to approve the minutes. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Correspondence, Ms. Neville?
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Budget Committee members. I'm Deborah Neville, the city's budget officer. This evening we have no correspondence on the agenda. However, we do have some handout material, which I'll move right into. Our first item is item 5A, a rata-free follow-up to our general fund du jour loan to the Urban Renewal Agency. At the meeting 2 weeks ago, the question came up by Member Summers whether we could do this on a cash basis and thus avoid impacting the figures, the budget amount for the general fund. Based upon that question, there was some follow-up performed by myself with the Finance Department, and that does not look like a possible alternative. The reason being is that the city and the Urban Renewal Agency are actually two separate entities, and you cannot transfer funds from one entity to another. You can only do it within the same organization. So that's the primary reason why we need to budget this as an expense in the materials and services category. The report goes on to point out several other reasons why staff believes it's important to show this as an expense. The other primary one is transparent presentation. We can show the expense in the budget and likewise the revenue. The advantage, too, is a cost avoidance for the Urban Renewal Agency. And we hope to appropriately plan for this expense in future years. It will just become part of the budget, and each year we would include this du jour short-term loan to the Urban Renewal Agencies. The report also includes an attachment showing our summary pages. It's a sample for you, so you can see one way that we can show the fact that we are providing a $3.6 million loan to the Urban Renewal Agency and yet still arrive at the subtotal for our actual operating budget. That's provided as a sample for you. So that concludes my report on this, Madam Chair.
And your recommendation, do we have?
Yes, my recommendation would be to increase the general fund non-departmental materials and services category by $3,600,000, and likewise increase the general fund revenue by $3,600,300.
Do we have a motion? Member Cannon?
Yes, I would move approval of the staff recommendation concerning et cetera 3 with the proviso that attachment 2 as a form of showing the budget would be also included as part of the motion.
Second.
It's been moved by Member Cannon and seconded by Member Klenn, and I don't think I can restate that motion.
Staff recommendation with the addition that attachment 2 or the format of attachment 2 be included as part of the format for the budget for next year.
Oh, all right. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Moving on to the next handout item, 5B, is an errata number 7 called Parks Landscape Maintenance. This actually involves the Cultural and Tourism Fund, also known as TOT or TOT, and it involves our park maintenance element of that budget. What we're asking the Budget Committee to do is approve, basically what we want to do is transfer money directly from the TOT fund to the general fund for the parks maintenance purposes that are now supported by the TOT fund. Once those monies are in the general fund, they will be transferred to the Public Works Fund, where they will be spent on the TOT eligible park maintenance activities. What this does is it actually eliminates a step in the whole process of getting monies to the Public Works Fund, and it will help them manage the program. What happens is the TOT projects end up costing more than the allowable amount or eligible budgeted amount in TOT, and the general fund picks up that difference. Rather than splitting the projects then in the Public Works Department into 2 segments, those that are funded by TOT and those that end up getting funded by the general fund, it will all just be billed basically to the general fund. So by performing these changes, it doesn't really change the bottom line cost at all. It just shifts the way that we're accounting for these projects, the landscape maintenance projects in the TOT fund. So we're asking that you decrease the materials and services budget in TOT by $351,260, but likewise you would be increasing the interfund transfer expense by the same amount. Then the general fund will need to receive that money, so we need an additional $351,260 in revenue, and then we would like to recommend increasing the expenses in the general fund by $351,260. The parks, Public Works, Parks and Transportation Services would be increased by $110,370, and that would be their revenue side, and then their materials and services would also increase by the $110,370. The reason that number is different than the prior numbers is because of the way it is currently billed. Right now, just the labor piece is billed through to the TOT fund. The Parks Department bills the TOT fund separately for supplies, materials and supplies. So this encapsulates all of this into one transaction type. Madam Chair?
We have any questions? Yes, Member Clem?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Deborah, for those listening to all this detail, let me see if I can ask the question and make it a little simpler. The motel tax we collect pays for some of our parks and maintenance in the general fund. Is that what this transaction is?
Yes.
Okay. And how much of the motel tax is used total to pay for parks maintenance?
Be the $351,260.
Okay. And the reason, and my last question is, the reason for the bump up in Public Works expenses by $110,370 is that, I understand the increase in the general fund expenses. Just wanting to make one transfer instead of two or three.
Correct.
But why the Public Works bump up?
Well, they're
Of
the
110.
department that manages the park's operations,
Okay,
and they need to receive the funds in order to perform the work.
okay. Not the whole 351?
Right.
Just
What they
110?
Yes, that's correct.
Is that a staff expense, or is that a materials and services? Any idea what that 110
It's
is for?
materials and services expense.
Okay. Because the general fund expenses go up by the 351, but it almost makes it look like we're bumping it up 461,000. That's what I'm trying to understand here. Are we doing that? Are we increasing?
No, it's the total is the 351,260.
Okay.
And then the differential between the 351 and the $110,000 would be the staffing element of the parks, parks maintenance.
Okay. The 110 here says materials and services. So
That's
that is
true.
not used for staff?
Not that portion. That other portion will be directly billed to the general fund against the $351,000.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Member Clausen?
All right. Sorry, Deborah, I'm a little slow on the uptake here. So that balance, the difference of $240,000, which is the difference from 351 to 110, is already in Public Works budget because they've been charging directly for that. And
That's
instead,
right.
they'll just charge the general fund.
Correct.
Okay, thanks. I just want to make sure I'm clear.
Do we have a motion regarding staff? Are we ready for a motion, staff? All right, yes,
Yeah,
Member
Madam Chair, I
Nan-
would go ahead and move staff recommendation for errata 7.
Second?
It's been, staff recommendation has been moved by Member Nanki and seconded by Member Cannon. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right.
All right, moving on to handout item 5C, amendment of Budget Committee procedures. This was brought up last week. Using the new procedures in order to alter the existing procedures. So basically what you received last week via a motion, I believe it was a request to alter the procedures to allow more flexibility in our closing time motion. Staff has attached a procedure change under item 3, schedule under the Budget Committee procedures, reflecting that in 30-minute intervals, up to 30 minutes, a majority vote of the members present could approve extending the meeting past the 10 o'clock stop time. We're submitting this to the Budget Committee and recommending its approval by the committee.
Member Motley, are you interested in making a motion for staff recommendation?
Indeed. I'll move that we adopt a staff recommendation without further discussion.
Moved by Member moved by Member Motley, seconded by Member Nanki, and discussion, Member McEvely.
Right. So I guess I'm confused on the procedures again. Don't we have to wait a week before we can vote approval of the staff recommendation?
Yeah, we
Therefore,
did.
the motion, but
We
she didn't
did.
make the recommendation till tonight. So therefore, I would think we could not vote on this until next week. We didn't have anything, we made a request, but they hadn't officially provided anything. Therefore, I would think that the motion would not be in order, and we'd have to wait one more week, now that we know what the proposal is, before we could vote on it.
May I respond?
Yes.
Under item number 17 in the procedures, it indicates that provided a proposed amendments or new procedures have been introduced into the record at a prior Budget Committee meeting not less than 6 days prior to Budget Committee action on the proposed amendment. By voice, the change was introduced and presented to the committee last week.
Right, but the formal recommendation and language was not introduced. I would think that is what it's referring to, not the concept.
He did verbalize the language as
So I just want to clarify that we're okay to, we've done what we're supposed to do before we vote on this.
Does anyone else have any problem with the language, the written language reflecting our previous discussion? And there's a motion on the floor. Are we ready to vote? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right.
All right, moving on to item 5D, handout material. We have provided the Parks Planning and Construction Priority List for you, prepared by our Public Works Director, Mr. Fernandez. This is provided for your information only. No action is required. Handout item number 5E is an errata sheet number 8. It's a Scrivener correction to the Building and Safety Fund summary page. Language was written underneath the numeric table to provide clarification as to the staffing changes that have occurred both this year, our current budget year, as well as then how it impacts the proposed budget year. We would ask that you accept these corrections to the Scrivener error.
So moved.
It's been moved by Member Cannon, seconded by Member Dickey to accept staff recommendation. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. Moving on to, are we ready for number 6?
Yes, we are ready for number 6. This is your weekly update summary of Budget Committee actions through our last meeting. It has 4 attachments on it, one showing the financial changes that have occurred or been recommended by the Budget Committee to date. The second handout or attachment is the items that are on the wish list. The third attachment is information and reports requested by the Budget Committee. And the last attachment is a list of the correspondence received to date. This is provided for information only. Madam Chair?
All right. Yes, Member Motley?
Yes, looking back at attachment 3, if perhaps I've forgotten, but what is the cost estimate to equip McKay Park?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that and speak into your microphone?
Sorry. What is the cost estimate to equip McKay Park?
We don't have that yet, and that date is incorrect in that case.
Oh, okay. What would be the correct date?
Next week, May 11th.
If I could, Madam Chair, on attachment 5D, that is Parks Planning and Construction Priorities provided by Mr. Fernandez, you can see in this table number 5, to update the master plan, the cost estimate is $20,000 for that. And it would begin in summer, fall of 2011, and the money would come from the general fund, if that was your question.
No.
Okay, you want to know the full cost of updating the park?
Well, the difference is this item 5 addresses the master plan, and I'm
Right.
interested in strictly removing that concrete berm,
Yes.
restoring McKay Park to a useful community park.
And we don't have that number yet. We'd have to do the design, the master plan, and then the design before we would know how much that would cost.
So we will not be able to come back to you before the Budget Committee ends its series of meetings this spring with a specific magnitude cost estimate for equipping McKay Park.
Mr. Bechtel and Kiva are here, and Mark, do you have any additional information you could provide?
Mark Bechtel, Parks and Transportation Services Manager. Linda Norris is correct. The exact estimate would have to depend on the update to the master plan. We did do a rough cost estimate of, based on what we know and what we think we would do, it'd be at least $1.2, $1.3 million to completely renovate that part of McKay Park and bring it up to standards and fix the drainage problems as well.
All right, if we're done with number 6, are we ready for goals? Whoops, I'm sorry. Was it Member Clausen?
Yeah, sorry, I had a quick question for for Mark, if I could.
Mark, if you could come back up.
Sorry, it had to do with that since we kind of jumped to it, if you don't mind. Mark, I don't see the Battle Creek master plan on here.
Yes, Councilor, it is. It's on your table 1 of attachment 5.
Oh, okay. There we go. Now I do. Thank you.
Goal setting and policy. Do we have anything under that? Moving right along to number 8, public testimony for future budget issues. This would be for items that are not on tonight's agenda. And I don't know that I have anyone signed up for items that are not on tonight's agenda.
I believe this one is for the future. Ted Campbell.
All right. Oh, you're right. Ted Campbell. Thank you. And you even spoke to me beforehand, so shame on me.
My name's Ted Campbell. I represent AFP, American Prosperity. And last week they talked about buying a generator for $987, so I made a trip out to the city motor park. You have several generators sitting out there that can be used. You have several gas-driven compressors up to 150 cubic feet per minute, compressors down to 5 CFM that can be used. All they have to do is go out there and get them. They're not used very much at all. Or they also have spray guns, and they do have an airless spray gun. Also, the city, or the Salem Kaiser School District, has a person they pay 8 hours a day to go around and wash graffiti with a pressure washer off buildings. You could subcontract with them probably and not have to do this at all. And the other thing, last week, Mr. Nanke brought up about the 20% that you'll receive out of the 6 cents gas tax hike. And I looked it up in House Bill 2001, dated out of legislature of 2009, says it must be used only for repair of existing roads or payment of existing road bonds and nothing else. So I think somebody said they were hiring somebody with that money, and they cannot do that. It has to be used to repair roads or pay for road bonds that are already existing. That's all I had, ma'am.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Campbell? We are ready to go to number 9, which is the review of the Cultural and Tourism Fund budget. Just bend it down a little bit more, Kelly. You can hit me later. That wasn't nice.
Good evening, Chair Strozic, Mayor Peterson, and members of the Budget Committee. My name is Kelly Jacobs. I'm a management analyst for the Salem Public Library, and I'm also staff support to the Culture and Tourism Promotion Advisory Board, and I manage the Culture and Tourism Fund for the city. I'd like to give you just a 60-second background about the Cultural and Tourism Fund. Transient occupancy tax, which is also known as hotel motel tax or lodging tax, has been collected in the city of Salem since 1974. The current tax rate of 9% is charged to the room occupant and collected by the hotel motel operator and then paid to the city. Uses of the tax revenue are guided by Section 56 of the City Charter and include enhancement and beautification of vehicular and pedestrian entranceways into the city, urban beautification generally, improvements to or operation of major tourist attraction or cultural facilities, and activities performed directly by the city or through contracts which promote use of Salem for conventions, conferences, seminars, or for general tourism. Guidance for collection of the tax is contained in SRC Chapter 37, and the duties of the Culture and Tourism Promotion Advisory Board are defined in SRC Chapter 16. Additionally, there is a financial policy for the tax, which is referred to as City Council Policy C1. The Cultural and Tourism Fund contains 5 functional divisions, which form the outline for my brief budget presentation this evening. First of all, on the left-hand side of the screen, the Salem Conference Center is budgeted to receive $550,000 in fiscal year 11-12, according to the proposed
pardon me,
budget.
could you speak, get the mic a little
little
bit
closer?
Thanks a lot.
The the Salem Conference Center, as I said, is budgeted to receive $550,000, and as you'll note, that's an increase of $100,000 over the current fiscal year. And what that represents is the end of a three-year agreement with the Conference Center to lower the marketing allocation for the Conference Center. So for 3 years, the allocation was set at $150,000. This current year marks the end of that three-year agreement, and so it's been increased up again to $250,000. So what you have here is $250,000 for marketing and the $300,000 allocation to the gain-loss reserve. Next up, tourism promotion. As you'll note, there is a slight increase in the proposed budget over the current year, and this actually represents the contracted services with the city's destination marketing organization, which is Travel Salem. This proposed budget, as I noted, is a slight increase of 3% over the current year allocation. To the right of your slide, city programs represents the cost to maintain city-owned historic properties and provide landscape maintenance at those properties and elsewhere in the city, such as places like Riverfront Park and Pioneer Cemetery. The proposed budget is equivalent to fiscal year 10-11 budget. Errata Report 7, included with the meeting agenda this evening and discussed earlier, addresses the issue of creating an efficiency for managing the funding of these landscape maintenance projects, but it also confirms the amount allocated in the Cultural and Tourism Fund budget is not sufficient to maintain the properties at an adequate level. So in other words, the general fund has been basically picking up the cost of that maintenance for the final quarter in the fiscal year. The funding allocation in the top budget is equivalent to approximately 3/4 of the fiscal year expense. I beg your pardon. Next slide. Tourist attractions and cultural facilities to the left of the slide here. In the current fiscal year, it's budgeted at $335,040. You'll note on this slide that there is a significant increase. These grants are intended to support the operation of tourist attractions or cultural facilities, special events that occur throughout the city during the year, and capital improvements at eligible facilities. This grant program was reduced by approximately 20% for the current fiscal year, that's 10-11, as compared to the 08-09 budget. The proposed budget represents an approximate 5% increase over the prior year funding level. This represents 42 grants being funded in fiscal year 11-12 as compared to 31 in the current fiscal year. In the middle of the slide here, administration. This division represents the costs associated with contract management for the Conference Center, for Travel Salem's contract, and all of the small grants that I just discussed. It also includes coordination of events at Riverfront Park, $36,000 for softball tournament bidding, $18,000 for continued support of Vision 2020 efforts, and the Cultural and Tourism Fund's share of the city's indirect cost allocation plan. The slide, or the section to the right where we're discussing top revenue, this of course is the primary source of revenue for this fund. There are other small revenue sources, but the top revenue is the primary source. And when we are comparing revenue, there is a notable change from the current fiscal year budget, which is the top line there, fiscal year 10-11, at $2.03 million, as compared to the proposed budget for 11-12. It's an approximate 10% increase. The current year budget was built on a very conservative base, based upon the significant reduction in revenue that we experienced in fiscal year 09-10. Near the end of 09-10, we began to experience a very small recovery, and that recovery was defined as, rather than 14 or 18% losses on a monthly basis, we started to see 3% losses or flat revenues. So we started to experience a little bit of a recovery in fiscal year 09-10 at the end of the year. This recovery has continued into the current fiscal year with an overall increase through April of approximately 4%. So revenue in the current fiscal year at this point is approximately 4% greater than this time last year. So the year-end estimate of $2.19 million is actually representative of what is occurring as opposed to what was established as a proposed revenue figure over a year ago. So we're experiencing an increase of revenue over budget of approximately $160,000. Based on current experience, the fiscal year 11-12 revenue proposal of $2.24 million represents an approximate 2% increase over where I'm estimating will end the current fiscal year. So it truly is just a 2% increase over what I think we'll end the fiscal year at. If the fiscal year 11-12 budget is realized just exactly as proposed, it will require the use of approximately 25% of the fund balance that I'm estimating for next fiscal year. If TOT revenue is generated at a higher rate than what I'm anticipating, that circumstance would be alleviated and the fund would be closer to living within its means. However, it's something that is monitored. Revenue is something that we monitor on a monthly basis, of course, with this fund, and we respond very quickly when we find that revenue is underperforming. It's not, we're not receiving it as anticipated. And that has taken the form in past years of cost reductions, particularly in the area of parks maintenance, facilities maintenance, and in Travel Salem's contract. As the TOT revenues, I beg your pardon, there is actually one other trend that we'll be watching in the upcoming months, and I just wanted to alert you all to this. As the TOT revenues have been gradually increasing, occupancy has not increased. So based on reports compiled by the city's finance division, occupancy numbers are lower now than this time last year, which means room rates on average must be a little bit higher to provide for an increase in tax revenue. While this is concerning by itself, we'll need to very carefully watch this in case lower occupancy is also followed by lower rates, which would really cause the revenue problems that we had in fiscal year 09-10. So that concludes my very brief and very rapid presentation, and I'm ready for your questions.
Excuse me. All right, excuse me. We hadn't discussed how we were going to handle citizen testimony. So I have 2 people signed up, but I would ask if either of these people are for this particular fund. Tom Beasley, I believe you were signed up for a different item, and Karen Holman, was that on this fund? That's okay. I think it's for this fund that you're signed up. So, did you want to testify?
Yes, please.
Okay. And I don't know if you're familiar with the process. You have a total of 3 minutes. After 2 minutes, the yellow light will come on, and after another minute, the red light will come on, and that's the end of your 3 minutes. So please go ahead.
Thank you. Mayor Peterson and members of the Budget Committee, my name is Karen Holman. I'm a chemistry professor at Willamette University, and I live in Ward 2. And I'm here to tell you about an exciting project coming soon to Salem. It's KMUZ 88.5 FM. And I want to tell you why community radio is important and how you can help it become a reality. We can tune into 67 FM radio stations here in the Mid-Willamette Valley, but none of those are locally generated material. Community radio, on the other hand, is locally generated. It is volunteer-run, listener-supported. And community radio can strengthen the pride of a community by broadcasting local public affairs, local cultural events, and activities of our nonprofits. Travel Salem and the tourism industry would benefit greatly from another medium to get the word out about what is happening around here. And in the case of a natural disaster, KMUZ Radio would be a communicator, which is one of the reasons why the Salem Police Department and Emergency Management Services has written letters of support for KMUZ for this very reason. We have come a long way since 2006 when we started this process. We've acquired a frequency assignment from the FCC, an enormously difficult task, and was a competitive selection process. And we have a nonprofit governing board, a program review committee. We have studios in the Mission Mill and an antenna for, or we have a site for the antenna in Turner. We have raised over $25,000 to date. This is through community supporters and 2 small TOT grants we just got this year, and thank you very much for that. and another grant from the Marion County Cultural Trust. We have a large foundation grant application that is pending. Once we're on the air, the signal will reach north into Salem, south to Albany, and it will reach towards Staten and Dallas. And once we are on the air, we plan to immediately start getting other equipment to broadcast an even stronger signal in the Salem City core and in Kaiser. But getting on the air is a major step, and it will take a large investment. And I understand that the budget is lean and there are a lot of needs. But this is the chance. We would like you to find funds that could help Salem and the Mid-Willamette Valley have something that it does not have now. And if we don't do this now, we might lose our chance for many, many years. It could be decades, actually. KMUZ radio is about public safety, about promoting tourism, and about building community. In a nutshell, the current funding need is just above $40,000 to get on the air by mid-August. And we are asking you to find funds to fund the antenna. That is $23,500. We have some money in hand, and we are working to find people to provide in-kind services to lower those costs. My final point is that the community wants KMUZ. We have letters of support from organizations and community leaders. Hundreds follow us on Facebook. And I believe there are some people here tonight. And so I ask, how many people came out tonight to support KMUZ? Please stand up. Thank you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Ms. Holman? Member Motley, Member Dickey.
Yes, thank you. Good presentation.
Thank you.
Is your organization tax exempt?
Yes, it is.
And how long has it been tax exempt?
Since 1981. Salem Folklore Community has been a nonprofit in this area since then.
Okay. And are you asking, when you're asking for funds, are you asking for primarily one-time establishment funds? Or
That is correct.
Ongoing support?
One time. This is to buy the antenna.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Member Dickey.
Hi, thanks for coming down. I'm really excited about your project. It's been many years of waiting, so I'm excited to see that you're really, really close to making it happen. I was just curious if you've applied. You said you got TOT grants last year?
This year, we were just...
This year? And what did you use those for?
Those will be used for, I'm actually going to defer to Janine Renee to answer that.
Sure. We received 2 TOT grants for fiscal year 2011-12, and one of them will be used to purchase a Marty RPU, which is a remote broadcasting device, so we can go around town outside of the studio and do live broadcasts from events like the World Beat or the Art Fair or whatever have you. The other one is a special event grant. Last year we brought a world-famous reggae historian to speak at Willamette and present material about Bob Marley, and we would like that to become an annual tradition. He's a world-class. He's appeared at the Smithsonian and other countries, and we'd like to bring him back, so we've got a special event grant for that.
Great, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Janine Renee, grant writer for KMUZs.
So could I have a quick clarification? So we're talking about 2 grants for the current fiscal year. So the term received is it will be received, assuming it goes through the budget process.
Correct.
And final approval.
Yeah, that's better said.
Okay, and Member Fox?
Yeah, Ms. Holman, I had a question. You said at one point that if you weren't able to get the antenna up by mid-August, that it may be a very long time before we have this opportunity again. Why is that? What do you mean by that?
Right. So one can only apply for a radio frequency when the FCC opens up a window of application. And the last time there was this window of application was at this point, almost 20 years ago. And then in 2006, they announced we're going to have another window of opportunity to apply in 2007, and that's when we applied. So this only happens, well, it was 15 years since the last one. We don't know if it'll be 15 years again. It's unknown.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Member Clem?
Thank you. Ms. Holman, the two grants that you're talking about that you may or will receive, hopefully, as you stated, are they two of the 42 grants? And how much, what's the dollar value of those?
Yes. 4,500.
Total for both?
Total for both, 4,500.
Okay, and they're represented in the grants that we have yet to approve?
For 11-12, yes,
Yeah, okay.
that is correct.
Thank you.
Well, it's a yeah.
Yes, if you look under your Cultural and Tourism Fund, page 182, you'll see under Special Events Project Grants, about 2/3 of the way down, there's the Salem Folklore Community, The Life of Bob Marley. That's one potential allocation. And then under Capital Improvement Outlay Grants, third from the bottom is Salem Folklore Community for Remote Broadcast Unit.
Okay, Member McEvely, and then Member Motley.
You know, having spent the first years of my working life in broadcast, both in commercial and in public radio, I have a concern when governments start offering some funding for broadcast. I'm looking at your list of people and organizations that support the station. I think the station's a good idea. If you look carefully at the list of businesses you provided, this is not a very good representation of the major businesses in Salem. And I would suggest that even though you're going to be a nonprofit broadcast facility, you are going to accept fees for underwriting programs, et cetera, that I'm way more comfortable, if the community wants it, for you guys to go out and sell the value of this broadcast effort to the commercial side rather than on this side. And the other issue that I'm worried about is you get the antenna today. Initially, you only have a signal that goes into South Salem. You're probably going to get a better signal in Albany than you are in Kaiser. And I'm worried about if the city would give you the money, things have a way of stopping. And I have a feeling that to get the signal up to broadcast strength to Kaiser and North Salem is probably some ways down the road. So I think that the antenna is a good goal, but I would think that you're going to have ongoing funds to maintain the station, which means you're going to need underwriting from the local business community. I think this would be a great opportunity for you guys to see if you have the skill to go get the underwriting from the business community today rather than turning to government. I just think the government needs to, for the most part, keep its funds out of broadcasting because there's always an implied pressure there. And I believe the medium needs to be separated. So.
You made some excellent points. A lot of that we have discussed, and so I appreciate you bringing those up. So we agree that underwriting is very important, and so we have in fact started that process of getting all the paperwork ready for getting underwriters and getting businesses. The trick there, we're right in this point where we are not broadcasting yet, and so it is a hard sell. And so that's why we are so much looking forward to getting the foothold and getting that antenna that does broadcast best to South Salem. There will be some into Salem. Actually, it will be pretty good signal in West Salem as well because of the hill there. But in any case, once we get that foothold, which this is one of those last FM frequencies that are in the Mid-Willamette Valley that exist, that remain, then once we have that, that will be an impetus to get that other, the translator that you were talking about, that would be several years out, and that is correct. It would be several years to get another translator to be able to broadcast more widely, but we cannot do that until we get this initial signal and this initial transmission from the South Salem area so that we can do that and can expand. And once we do have that broadcast ability, then that's when we can get the underwriters. So a lot of them will be waiting for us to be on the air, and then once we have this station going, and then being able to sell that time easily. We are approaching businesses and talking to several, and they have shown interest in underwriting in a sort of preemptive stage. And so we will be getting funds that way, it's looking like. So, but because this is a community station and we will be doing so much for the community members here and the city, we thought that it was appropriate and is appropriate to ask the city for a small segment of this. It's not going to be the majority of it, but it's going to be a huge help. So we did think it was appropriate to ask the community and the city being a representation of the community.
Right, but as a follow-up, with the translator being quite a ways down the road, we don't really have a functioning broadcast facility that's really going to serve the entire community for a long time. And that's why I would think that you'd be better served at this point to look at commercial support rather than governmental support.
Member Motley and then Member Berger.
I'll pass, thank you.
Member Berger.
Did you apply for a capital?
Mike, please.
Sorry. Did you apply to get a capital improvement outlay grant for this?
Yes.
And you were denied, or why aren't you on this list with all the other grants?
Okay, so that is one of them, and we should be. That was for the Marty's. She had talked about the ability to go off-site and broadcast.
I think.
But the antenna you're talking about, yeah.
We did not apply for the antenna, a capital grant for the antenna.
But are you asking for it now?
That's what we're here for now, yes.
And why didn't you apply for the grant in the first place?
Well, I guess part of it was asking for these things we did have, and I think because we have applied in the past, and in the past we weren't funded, that we didn't feel comfortable for asking for that amount at that point, and so we made a decision to write our grants in that way at that time.
Okay, thank you.
So this is outside the grant process that you're requesting?
That is correct.
And let's see, Member George?
Yes, I just had a question, and reading through what you plan on having as far as your content, is any portion, when you say like the news, is there going to be like talk radio with any particular political bent? I mean, I want to say that as kind as I can. I mean, but is that part of what the venue would be, or giving a political position on the news? Or
so yeah, all of our programming will need to fit into the mission of what is stated there. You have it there, so on our mission statement. So we will be looking for things that aren't already widely programmed in this area. So there is a selection process. So we have a program mediation review committee. People will apply for shows. And if we deem it's a talk radio show that is something that is already available on radio in this area, then that's not fulfilling our mission.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, do we have any other, yes?
Are you soliciting funds from the city of Albany?
Not yet, but we are, as we speak, we are generating relationships with those other entities, the City of Turner, City of Monmouth. Albany is next on the list to get those relationships going so that we can, like we are asking you, to ask all of the communities in this area that we'll be serving for funds. So am I asking them tonight? No, but will we be asking them? Yes.
Okay.
Member McEvely?
Just a follow-up question, because there are 67 stations we can listen to. I know it's impossible for you to project a share, but I'm just curious of what you guys think that share might eventually translate to be.
Difficult to predict, but one thing that we will have, none of them will have, is that local content and the community-generated programming.
Right, which doesn't matter if you don't have any share, and that's why I'm wondering who you think the target audience is in this community. I mean, it's a pretty narrowly defined audience that you're going to reach. You're not going to reach the 20 and the 30-year-olds. I mean, they're not going to listen to this type of broadcasting. That's why I wonder if you have some estimate of audience size that you would think would be realistic.
I actually believe it's quite a broad variety of people that would be attracted to this type of station. Willamette University students are applying for shows, and we've also solicited to Western Oregon University students. Quite a few, let's see, a South Salem High School teacher is planning on getting his students involved. So we will have quite a few in the younger sect who will be involved. Many of our supporters are 20-somethings who have small businesses who have started in that way. And many of those who are working on the station represent middle age as well and up. So in terms of age, it's broad, and then what we are willing to broadcast in our mission, it is diverse. So we want to reflect and have quite a few of the different cultures that are in this area and opinions, and to be able to reflect our cultural diversity in this area.
So if you'd get the funding for the antenna, what would the odds be that you'd be back here next year and the year after and the year after looking for funds from the city?
We won't need to, because at that point, once we're on the air, we will have the listener support. So that includes fund drives. It will also have underwriting. And so one of our board members and treasurer, he has done exactly what we're doing now. He has established 2 community radio stations in his past and has been a general manager of community radio stations for about 17 years. And he has seen this process happen, and it's getting on the air, and then once you're on the air, you can self-generate those funds.
Do we have any other questions? All right. I have, okay, Member Berger, and just before we wrap this up, for those in the audience, I have no one else signed signed up for this fund. So if you want to speak on the Cultural and Tourism Fund, be prepared to come up to the mic in a minute. Member Berger?
I didn't raise my hand. I think Mr.
I'm
Fox
sorry,
did.
Member Fox.
I was just sitting here listening and thinking that this would actually be a pretty good conduit for supporting some of the same tourist destinations, events, and programs that this fund promotes. Sorry, I lost my note here. I just think that this seemed, in terms of comparing it to commercial support.
Is that a question for, because we're...
Yeah, but I guess what I wanted to ask, I'm
if you
formulating
have
it
a
into a
question for her, go ahead,
Thank
otherwise
you.
we'll do it later.
Excuse me, Darlene, thank you. In terms of the question in commercial support versus public support, is there something that's going to be, I guess, offered to the community different than what you would get from a commercially supported radio station? Or what would be compromised if your support was primarily commercial to begin with?
Let's see. Well, we expect that our funds will be coming from those 2 exact different sources. So the underwriting coming from that commercial support, and then the listener-sponsored part, the membership drives and those types of things that happen. And our programming, if one outbalances the other, we will still be going by our mission statement, and we'll be programming how we're going to program, whether or not the funds, that balance gets offset. So I don't know if that's answering your question exactly.
Just kind of, I guess there was a question about political leaning and whatnot, and I was curious about...
underwriters can't have any, if I give you this money, that is completely against all FCC rules, and so we yeah.
Thank you.
All right. I thank you very much. I think we're done grilling you. And thank you for speaking for everyone who came.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
I believe we're ready for questions of staff on the Cultural and Tourism, a.k.a. TOT Fund, and I'll take Chair's privilege to ask the first one, and then I need to start writing down names. Kelly, if this request were granted, where would that money come from? Would it come out of other grants?
Well, if it's going to be granted for fiscal year 11-12, I guess it's within the purview of this body to recommend that we use contingency for that purpose. It is outside the grant process, but the Budget Committee has the option to make whatever recommendation it chooses to make.
Consistent with the Budget Committee's procedures, you normally have put items on a wish list and then said where you would like the money to come from or what you would like to go away that's in the budget.
If it came out of the same slice of the budget, it would mean someone else not getting that funding. Someone who did apply and go through the process.
That's right.
Let me make sure I'm in order here. Member Clem?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kelly, with regard to the capital improvement outlay grants, because that's really what this last request is for, were there other applicants who were denied just based on some sort of belief that we had targets in terms of budget?
Sure. Actually, in the proposed budget that's before you, all of the applicants, all of the applicants who applied were actually awarded funding. I mean, there were only the applicants that you have in your notebook.
So no one else was turned away?
No one else was turned away. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that this organization has applied just in the prior grant cycle for the current fiscal year and were not awarded funding in the current fiscal year. So this is their second round of grant applications with the fund.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions on this fund? Member Cannon?
Kelly, thank you for your excellent presentation, as always. I'm looking at page 182, contingencies. The contingency fund has been reduced by $77,980. Can you amplify on why, or is that just the math and whatever turns out to be $200,000?
Good question. Thank you for that. For the first time ever in my time working with this fund, we've established an unappropriated ending fund balance. So you have a $200,000 contingency, but you also have a $216,000 unappropriated ending fund balance. And what I would anticipate is that contingency amount and that unappropriated ending fund balance amount would be the fund balance for the next fiscal year. And it would represent about a 25% decrease over what I'm anticipating would be the fund balance for the upcoming year. So we're going to see a decrease if everything happens as planned. But that's why you're seeing that. You've got contingency plus you've got unappropriated ending fund balance.
Was that a board recommendation? I mean, the idea was...
That was actually a staff recommendation, and board accepted the recommendation.
If the Budget Committee members would refer to page 179 under proposed 1112, you'll see the beginning cash balance there of the $579,550, which is a combination of those two amounts, which is actually lower than it's been every year except in adopted 10-11 budget.
Member Dickey?
Thanks. I'm not exactly sure who this question is for, but I have a question about, at the beginning of the meeting, we had talked about the landscaping that's done by Public Works, and if you remember, a couple years ago, we had quite a discussion about our entryways being maintained out of this fund, and I don't see that in here anywhere. Can somebody tell me what happened to that?
And I don't know if Mr. Bechtel wants to come to the microphone. There was not funding specifically allocated to that because we were challenged with funding the areas that this fund had historically supported. So the entranceway beautification funding was an idea that we developed in the fund several years ago, but we've been very challenged just funding the areas like Riverfront Park and the Bush property and Deepwood Estate.
So did it just go away?
It's just an allocation that was not continued.
Member Bennett?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question for the city manager. Are there any legal issues, or do we know if there are legal issues associated with the city providing funds in an FCC licensing process like this? I had understood there might be.
Yes, I understand that there may be as well. I'm not an attorney, but I think it would be a good idea to get a written legal opinion from the city attorney before moving forward with that request.
Will that happen during the budget process, or will that be after our...
I'll make a motion on that at some point.
Second.
This is that time. I move we ask the city manager to consult with the city attorney and return with a legal opinion to make sure where we are relative to this funding proposal. Is that enough?
Yeah.
Was that seconded by Member Motley, or did? Yeah, all right. It's been moved by Member Bennett, seconded by Member Motley to request the city attorney opinion on the city funding.
The request for the antenna.
Yes. Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any other questions on this fund?
I have a comment. I'm glad that the issue of the, thank you, Diana, for bringing up, Councilor Dickey, for bringing up the issue of the entranceways and the landscaping and the maintenance, because what I'm concerned about is that as funds ebb and flow, it seems that it's easy to forget something that was very strongly felt last year. I wasn't here, but I watched, and I remember the concern among the council about the entranceways and the appearance that our city has, and that's a very important part of our tourism, as well as our community pride. I'm concerned that that's not included, and I would like to suggest that there be an opportunity to find the funding for that maintenance.
All right. Now, I wasn't watching, and I have Member Nanke and Member Cannon, and I don't know who raised their hand first. And Clem. Oh, dear. I saw Nanke first.
In that light, are there any budgeted funds in any fund for gateway treatments?
And I'll ask Mr. Bechtel to come forward.
Mark Bechtel. Right now, the landscaping for street rights-of-way as you enter the city is done through state highway funds and performed largely by inmate crews working through parks operations. What you used to have with the TOT-funded entranceway work was enhanced maintenance at those entranceways. So you would have seen additional flowers and plantings, and you would have seen weeding and bark mulching more often. Right now, you're getting the same basic treatment at the entranceways as you would see anywhere else in the city. There's no enhanced level of maintenance.
Member Cannon?
I'm prepared to make a motion if the discussion is completed. So maybe Councilor Kemp.
Thank you.
Member Clem?
I think the issue that we were all excited about was the signs, gateway signs. So I think not related to the maintenance alone, but what's the status? There was a task force, there were funds identified, and I know there's work that's ongoing, so maybe that would help clarify the issue, to have some understanding what's going on with the gateway sign
Yes.
program.
City Council, I think in the last meeting or in the last couple of meetings, approved a motion to move forward with the new design for the gateway signs coming into the community.
And that comes out of which fund?
And
Does that need to come out of this is the question.
Yes, it was Vision 2020 funds in the Urban Development Department budget.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Member Cannon, were you wanting to make a motion?
I will make a motion after the discussion is completed.
Oh, Member Berger.
Question probably for Mark. You talked about this fund going to enhance parks. I'm wondering, is there a baseline for parks, and then we're getting certain increased in area, or are these just supplementary the parks budget? For example, is there a line in Bush Park where it suddenly gets, you get away from the Bush House and suddenly the park gets less maintained? Or I'm just kind of wondering how that maintenance takes place.
I'm going to actually defer to our park superintendent, Keith Keever. He can tell you on a day-to-day basis how those funds are used.
Hi, Keith Keever, park superintendent. Bush Park is a great example of a park that we hold what we call hold harmless. We maintain it at a high level throughout the park. So even though tot fund only goes to certain areas, we maintain the rest of the park at the same level with general fund money. There are some other areas that tot funds that where we do draw the line and we don't maintain the other areas at the same level. So it just varies with each park.
I assume there's some Parks Commission that sets that policy on where you're drawing the line and where you're choosing to do enhancement funds and not?
Well, essentially, we make that decision internally. We run decisions through the Parks Board.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff on this fund? I have a question. Are any of the Cultural and Tourism Advisory Board members here tonight?
I don't see any.
Okay. All right. I think we are ready for the next item.
Member Cannon was going to make a motion.
Member Cannon, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move staff recommendation on this particular budget item and with an addition. I believe the contingency fund needs to be increased from $200,000 to $300,000. And if I get a second, I will speak to the question.
It's been moved by Member Cannon and seconded by Member Clem to increase the contingency to $300,000.
Madam Chair, members of the Budget Committee, essentially what we've done is we have an ending fund balance, and I appreciate that, but the real crux of this debate is should we fund our contingency at what we did last year. We have many requests, and we have a very finite amount of money. My motion includes the concept that we add $100,000 to contingency and then allow the city manager to discuss where that $100,000 would come out of in this particular budget. And in consultation with them, then the city manager can make a determination as to which of these particular resources or grants would be reduced and in what proportion. Concept here is this. I hate to be a naysayer, but I don't think our economy is going to come back as quickly as others do. I hope I'm wrong. I also believe that the number of dollars that we're going to generate through the TOT funding is not going to be as high as is predicted. Additional cushions and contingency, I think, are good business practices, and I think that we should encourage the city to hold on to as much money as they can, and having an additional $100,000 in contingency with the additional cash carry forward, I think would establish roughly $500,000. The other side of this is to consider the question of the additional requests that we have had specifically tonight. Right now, there is no way that the antenna or any other additional things that come up in the year can be funded, but this would be a way to take a look, go back to the TOT board, and see what they might say. So those are my comments on this particular motion.
Member Clem?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the maker of the motion, do you intend that the unappropriated balance, that the money could come from there, or would it have to come from all the expense items above the contingency?
It would come from wherever the TOT board in consultation with the city manager would direct.
Okay, thank you. And if I could, Madam Chair, the question for staff would be, is it, if we're worried about over-predicting the revenues, what Kelly talked about, would it be better to put it in contingency or leave it in unappropriated balance, carry forward balance? Which one provides you the clearest picture of scaling back if we need to?
I believe my recommendation would be to look at the expenses and reduce the expenses. We know when gas was at $4 and over $4 a couple of years ago that we did see a pretty substantial decrease in TOT revenue, and I think that's the thing we're looking forward to. As you know, we put these budgets together months in advance of when you get them, and some things have changed pretty substantially in the economy since that time. So we would look at the expenses. My recommendation would be to, as you see on page 179, the beginning fund balance at 579, to have that be somewhat larger.
Any further discussion of the motion? Yes, Member McEvoy?
But to give weight to Mr. Cannon's comments, being in the petroleum business, we've seen just in Salem alone, our customers here year to date, their gasoline volumes, meaning their wholesale purchases from us, are down greater than 15%. So the travel has slowed down. Part of it's budgetary for households, but part of it we serve people all the way from Medford to Longview, Washington. On average, our same store volumes are down in gasoline 18% year to date. So there is some impact coming, and I think Mr. Cannon's wise to go the direction it's going.
Yes.
So just as clarification, so I understand fully what I'm voting on. So with this motion, with the maker of a motion, is that intended that then we just walk away from it and allow them, or does it come back to us for final approval?
I would prefer to have the TOT board, in consultation with the city manager, make that decision. I think they're the best versed in doing that. And quite frankly, coming back here, I don't know what the right policy is. I'd let the people who are closest to the situation make that decision.
Yeah. Member Clem?
Madam Chair, for staff, Kelly brought up that marketing support, which I've always supported, is increased by $100,000 this year for the conference center. Is there any leeway there, or is that a contractual requirement with our partners there?
It is a contractual requirement. When this economy started to go through problems, I met with the manager of the Salem Conference Center, and given that we knew that revenue for this fund was going to be lower, asked if he would agree to take less money for marketing and use more of the operating funds, and he agreed to do so, and not just for 1 year, but said, since we don't know how long this is going to last, how about for 3 years? That's the agreement we made, that said it would be 3 years. I can talk to him about if there can be some flexibility with this next year, but he kept his commitment, and I feel obligated that we should keep our commitment as well.
Any other comments or questions? No. Yes, Member Burgert?
Question to the maker of the motion. So would you feel that they would have correctly applied your motion if they decided as a group to simply move $100,000 from unappropriated funds into contingencies? And if they did do that, wouldn't that be the same thing in essence of what we have right now?
I don't believe so. I think that my motion is specifically to increasing contingencies by $200,000, and I think you're yes, increase it by $100,000 to $300,000. I think your point's very well taken. So if the second would accept an amendment to my motion, I would say that the unappropriated balance remain as it currently is. Okay.
Any other comments or discussion before we vote? Yes, Member Clem?
How will we know, given that the motion intends for the top board with city manager to come up with some other recommendation, how will the budget committee be involved from that point on? Not at all? Final vote night, that sort of thing?
The last meeting of the Budget Committee is next Wednesday, and I believe the top board meets on next Tuesday. If that's enough time to make that decision, we can bring that back to the Budget Committee for information, and otherwise it would go to the City Council as you do your final deliberations on the budget.
I would like to add an amendment to the motion that it come back to the Budget Committee next Wednesday for Budget Committee final review.
Is that acceptable to the second?
No, that's just an amendment. Somebody needs to second it.
So we have motion and 2 amendments right now, so I'll second the current amendment.
Okay, all right. Any further discussion? So we are voting on the amendment to bring it back next week to the Budget Committee. Yes, Member Bennett?
I'm a little concerned with the amendment bringing it back as quickly as next week. There is quite a bit, I think, when you're talking about the size of $100,000 and you look at the expenditure side, there's quite a bit of work that's going to go into this. And I just am, having chaired the top board before, I just would warn you that you'll be very lucky. I just don't know how they can do it. They already have an agenda, I assume, that's prepared. Just notifying the potential stakeholders involved would take some real time. I mean, I'm sure the word will go out, probably is out right now, but I'm surprised there aren't more people here to testify on it with that. If we waited 5 minutes, the doors will open, I think. But I just would suggest that maybe this is one that the manager and the top board be given the necessary time to go through the deliberations, because there's going to be quite a bit at stake. We're going to hear about it at council no matter what. It will come to the city council in our final budget deliberations. That's where this decision will ultimately be made.
Just to clarify, will that come back to council then before final?
Yes, I think if you go ahead with this motion, the Budget Committee could recommend the budget to council at a fund level for this fund rather than at the more detailed level. And then when it gets to the council in June, we could have the detail for you. And that would give us time to process it with the stakeholders, which I think would be important.
I agree, and I'll withdraw my motion. I just want to respect the Budget Committee process. And make sure Budget Committee members have a chance to weigh in on all the funds equally. So that was the intent of my motion. But if that's just timing-wise not possible, I'll withdraw my amendment.
Second concurs.
Okay, all right. And as another former chair of the top board, I normally would not be thrilled with bypassing that board, but I think that's a fairly complicated decision for them to rush through in such a short time. So I would not. Yes, and by the way, they can still, weigh in if they want to. I don't think we should require them to in this short time frame. All right, we had what is on the floor now? Because we had an original motion and then.
Madam Chair, could I restate the, excuse me, the motion as amended?
I remember your original motion.
The motion as amended, let's see. I think we have to restate the...
Unless you want to make a substitute motion.
All right. I think Member Nanke is correct. I will do a substitute motion which will include both the primary motion and the amendment if the second will concur.
I will. Could you restate what they are?
Sure.
The first motion was to increase by 100,000 to 300,000, the contingency.
The contingency, that's correct. And the amendment was to assure, and Member Berger had a very good point, that the unappropriated balance not be included in that. So that's what, so the substitute motion would be to approve the budget as presented by staff with the increase in the contingency to 300,000 and not to touch the unappropriated balance, whatever it might be in the actual budget for this year, with the inclusion that the question of where the money is to be taken out of the budget be referred back to the TOT board in consultation with the city manager.
All right, so the motion by Member Cannon, seconded by Member Klenn. Any further discussion?
Second to the substitute motion.
Yes, Member Berger?
Clarification on procedure of this body. This is my first year doing this. Right now, we're just moving, in my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is we're moving numbers here on paper, and then we're not approving a budget tonight just like we didn't approve a budget last night. So we're moving the numbers on paper, and then at the end of this process, we will be actually approving this budget as amended.
That's right.
Or amend it again if we want to amend it again, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
All those in favor of the motion? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Well, whizzing right along here to number 10. Review of Willamette Valley Communication Center Fund budget.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, this is where your additions agenda will come into play. We have the EMS, Emergency Medical Services Fund.
All right, so we're doing emergency medical services now. I guess that is our imaginary one. Good job. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Budget Chair Stroza, Mayor Peterson, councilors, and members of the Budget Committee. I'm the Fire Chief Mike Niblock, and tonight I will be presenting the EMS budget. Before I begin, I want to introduce our management analyst, Ben McCready, in the bright blue shirt here, who is responsible for preparing this budget and will be assisting me in answering questions this evening. Fire department operations are supported by two funds, as I mentioned in the general fund budget, the general fund and the emergency medical services fund. Tonight's presentation will focus on the emergency medical services fund and the operations supported by that fund. The EMS fund has two main functions: administration and advanced life support. The administration section is responsible for ambulance billing, rural metro contract administration, and oversight. The billing department provides services for 6 agencies: Salem, Kaiser, Turner, Marion County, Jefferson, and Dallas. Last year, our billing operation handled nearly 9,000 bills for a total of $8 million in charges processed. The section is also responsible for the oversight of the Capital Fire Med program, which manages nearly 4,500 active household memberships every year. The advanced life support section of this division maintains the materials and services for our ALS first response system, which includes our backup ambulance, transport services, medications, and medical supply equipment. The EMS division has 5 full-time employees and a budget of $1.3 million and change for fiscal year 2011-12. This chart shows a breakdown of our proposed budget for next year. I'd like to highlight some of our major accomplishments related to the EMS fund from last year. The city was able to negotiate a 5-year contract extension with our private public provider, Rural Metro Ambulance. The highlights include increased remuneration for the city, which allowed us to have more ambulances deployed in the system and keep our fire trucks in service a greater percentage of time. We look forward to many years of continued partnership with Rural Metro Ambulance. The second item I want to highlight is the EMS division contracted services with Dr. Clothier, a board-certified emergency room physician at the Salem Hospital. He provides physician advisor services and paramedic oversight for our program. In addition to program oversight, Dr. Clothier will be instrumental in ongoing education and quality improvement processes. And finally, on a biennial basis, the state of Oregon requires recertification of all emergency medical technicians and paramedics. The EMS training division will complete this process in June for all fire department personnel. And lastly, for this brief presentation, I want to share some significant changes for 2011-12 and some emerging issues. As previously discussed during my general fund presentation, reorganization in the Emergency Operations Training and Emergency Medical Services Division is reflected in our 2011-12 budget. This reorganization more closely aligns the responsibilities with each division and provides more efficient organizational structure. Electronic charting. By 2015, federal mandates will require electronic documentation as part of our pre-hospital billing practices. Agencies who fail to meet these requirements will face a reduction or loss of reimbursement at both the state Medicaid and national Medicare levels. This new electronic charting system will greatly assist our quality assurance and quality improvement programs with better data collection and analysis. This system has been requested through our capital outlay within this year's budget. Within Marion County, there are 11 assigned ambulance service areas for what we refer to as an ASA. Salem Fire Department has been assigned one of these franchises. By Marion County ordinance, all 11 ASA franchises are subject to a rebid process, which the county commissioners have decided will occur in 2011. And finally, as we look forward to the future, there are several potential capital expenditures which we anticipate. These would include heart monitor defibrillators, which are nearing the end of their serviceable life, upgrades to our billing software to accommodate the new electronic charting system, and the replacement of ambulances in the distant future. My staff and I are prepared to answer any questions you may have. Thank you. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Any questions? Member Clem?
Chief, good, quick presentation, like an emergency service, right?
Yeah.
What's the ASAs are up for recharting in 2011?
Originally, it was scheduled for December 2012, and they've moved it up a year. So it's 2011 that the rebid process is going to happen.
Okay, so what kind of funds are being needed for that? Are we spending any money on that, or is that purely a Marion County Commissioner Board of Commissioners issue?
That's correct.
Okay, I trust you'll keep council appraised.
Absolutely.
Yes, Member George, and then Member Motley.
Chief, you mentioned some equipment. What was the equipment again? You said it was going to need to be upgraded. Is that on the engines that go out, or is that in the rural metro equipment?
It's on our engines. All of our vehicles are advanced life support equipped, so they have paramedics on them. The piece of equipment that I mentioned was a heart monitor defibrillator, which is the piece of equipment that we place on somebody if they're having a heart attack, and we can defibrillate them, we can pace them, so we can get them to the hospital. Those units are nearing the end of their life cycle. Within the next couple of years, we're going to need to start to replace those. They are pretty expensive units, about $25,000 a piece. We have 26 of them in our fleet. And so that's a pretty significant cost. And so as we look to the future for the reserves in this fund, we need to look at our capital replacement needs.
Does rural metro have these too?
They do. They carry them on their vehicles as well.
And why do you need them in both if you both come there?
That's correct. 71% of the time, the fire department arrives first on scene at an ambulance call, and time is of the essence when you're having a heart attack or a medical problem. So our people begin treatment, and rural metro comes in and takes that care and then takes them to the hospital.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions? Yeah. Oh, Member Motley, yes.
Thank you. The division reorganization up here refers to fiscal 11-12, so the reorganization has not occurred yet?
Part of it has occurred. The second part of it is in process right now, and we are hoping by July we will have that completed by the start of the new fiscal year. So we have budgeted for that reorganization to be in effect for 11-12.
Okay. Can we determine from staff if that reorganization, having the part that has occurred as well as what will occur prior to the fiscal year change, was carried any weight in the reallocation in the ICAP?
I didn't hear the last part. If it has occurred.
In the reallocation of the ICAP. These folks, indirect cost expenses going up by $7,000.
Speak into your mic a little more, please.
These people's indirect cost is going up by $7,000. Okay. They're having a reorganization. Okay. Organization is how cost allocation plans form a basis for distribution. What has the plan that zaps them another $7,000 recognized the reorganization that has already occurred and that will occur or not?
Yes, they asked Rachel Hostetler, our budget analyst and fire, to address that.
Thank you. I'm Rachel Hostetler, management analyst too. The indirect cost allocation actually is not affected by this reorganization. The reorganization only, budget-wise, takes funding for one deputy chief position, adds revenue to general fund from the EMS fund. So that, and it actually happens in 11-12 is when the funding will happen. So ICAP actually wasn't affected by that because ICAP is prior fiscal year data for current fiscal year charge.
But the ICAP is supposed to reflect the organizational structure in place at the time the supporting transfers occur, which will be in 12. That's under 87, OMB Circular 87. So if there's a move between funds, general fund versus EMS, then that would affect the distribution of ICAP. If it doesn't, our ICAP is incorrect.
Yes. Mr. Mounts, can you come and address the ICAP process the city uses? Different organizations have different methods of doing this.
Tony Mounts, Administrative Services Director. I can probably safely say that the ICAP does not reflect any changes with the reorganization. So the numbers that were budgeted for the funds were developed during January, early February, and at least when we were going through that process, we had no knowledge of any reorganization and any way to anticipate what that change might be.
Could you address how will it be adjusted in the future for this change?
Essentially, the indirect cost plan is taking central services and allocating those costs to direct programs via a variety of different methods. And so everything from number of log-ons for the central financial systems costs to payroll checks that are issued by divisions. So once we go through next year and we understand what our costs are for central services and what the costs were for the direct programs, those changes will be reflected about 2 years from now. Okay, so it's always basically a recovery process for what we actually spend in the current year, developing the relationship between central services and direct programs, and then recovering that cost in a future year's budget.
I'd just like to point out that 2 of those reorganizations just occurred, and the final one will be just before July. So Tony Mouse is correct. It will be in future years we'll see those adjustments.
Member Clem?
Yes, I would comment on that. Every fund is charged an ICAP fee, and what I noted in this budget is that by and large every fund experienced some manner of increase. Overall, the highest increase fund, I guess other than previously levied taxes in our general fund budget, the highest increase in 11-12's budget over 10-11 is the intra-fund services, and that's the ICAP. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
It includes it.
We're going to see that in every fund, and it may be appropriate to ask information how that whole thing works as opposed to just this one fund.
Thank you. I did do that.
Do we have other questions? Did you have another question, Member Motley?
No, thanks.
All right. If we have no further, I'm sorry, Member Cannon?
I don't have a question, I have a comment under discussion. Is this the appropriate time?
If it's on this budget item, it is.
It is. Yes, it is. I said this last year, and I think I said it the year before, but to be consistent, I'm going to support the budget, and I think that the fire department folks just do a great job. I remain concerned about the size of the contingency fund as the beginning working capital. So just my perennial comments with regard to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. I think we're done with EMS for now. On to the one that I jumped the gun on before, number 10, review of Willamette Valley Communication Center Fund budget.
Good evening, Chair Strozit, Mayor Peterson, members of the Budget and Council, Jerry Moore, Chief of Police. I'll actually be presenting 3 funds this evening, and I will try and do them in rapid order here. I have a few folks here also that I'd like to introduce. Linda Weber, our management analyst, to answer some of our questions, and Director Buckholz of our Communications Center, who oversees these funds. The Willamette Valley Communications Center was formed as a consolidated dispatch center 20 years ago. It serves 17 police, fire, and sheriff's departments. The Willamette Valley Communications Center dispatches for every police and fire agency in Polk County and most of the larger cities in Marion County. The center serves a population of approximately 330,000 residents with 60 staff members, and I will let you know that the 60 staff members is basically the same as was budgeted for the communications unit 15 years ago. And we would like to thank some of the advancements in technology that this council has helped provide us, has aided us in being able to keep staffing levels at the same level. Just as in the police department, we strive to be good stewards of public money, and one of the ways we've done that is to reduce overtime in the communications center. Director Buckholz has done a great job of recruiting and achieving full staffing and reducing turnover, and that has resulted in the lowest overtime expenditures since I believe since the center was created in 1991, which is a great effort. Major accomplishments in the last year include beginning the replacement of our computer-aided dispatch system, which we commonly call CAD. This system does many things, from tracking information about calls and where an emergency call is located to where our personnel are situated and whether they're in service or out. It instantly recommends the closest fire apparatus, whether it be a heart attack or a 2 or 3 alarm fire. Unfortunately, the current system that we have has not been updated in about 4 years, and we are looking at and that is why we're going to be replacing it. We've also begun replacement of our mobile data system, and this system is the in-car communication platform between our dispatchers and our officers, and also allows us to communicate from car to car. One of the great things about this system is we can do it without utilizing the radio. We try and keep the radio free for emergency traffic, and this allows us to talk car to car and communicate important information that we may not want to be put over the air. The system also allows our officers in the cars to run wants, obtain information about the call they're on, and actually update that information, allowing the dispatcher to do other more important things at the time. This past year, we began providing CAD service for the city of Toledo, and in the last several years, we also did the same service for Lincoln City. And why that is so significant is the more partners we have, the less costs we have for each of our member agencies. So we believe that is a good practice in that we're able to bring other agencies in and help share the costs. During the next year, we will complete the installation of the new CAD and mobile data systems, but we will also be replacing our 911 telephone system with what we call the next generation system. This system will allow us to do a lot more things, both in the dispatch center and in communicating with our officers in the field. It will actually allow us to receive pictures, texts, streaming video from complainants that are calling our 911 center, and in turn that information will be allowed to be dispatched to our officers in a much more timely fashion. We believe in many cases that will provide us instant identification of suspects or people or vehicles of interest, and so we're actually looking forward to that. As with our radio fund and our fires fund, which I'll talk to in just a few moments, we always continue to seek partnerships for efficiencies and cost savings, and we will continue to do that. That concludes my presentation for WVCC, and if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Any questions? Member Bennett, with your mouth full?
Yeah. Say that again about the streaming video. That was really kind of interesting. So I'm with my iPhone, and what? what will that do for me as a consumer of police services?
Well, it's our belief, and Director Buckles can correct me if I'm wrong, but will probably be able to transmit that to our dispatch center, and in turn, our dispatch center will be able to get that to our officers in the field. For instance, if you were at if you observed a hit and run accident and you took a picture of the vehicle and sent it into our dispatch center, that information could be dispatched to our officers. So instead of maybe looking for a certain type of car and a certain color, we know exactly what car we're going to be looking for.
Wow.
Anything else on that particular fund? If not, we'll let you continue, Chief Mark.
I believe our excuse me, our priors fund is next, which is our regional records management system. Basically, this is our police records management system. Citations, warrants, evidence, and case reports are all funneled through this system and allows our officers to actually enter the information right into the system from their cars in the computer. This independent fund was created to track and maintain the costs associated with supporting the prior system. There are no actual FTEs associated with this fund. There are 14 law enforcement partners who use this system and share in the overall cost. And having those partners also allows us to share information that they have in their system so that it's available to our officers. Planning for technology in the future includes the capabilities such as magnetic card swipes for driver's licenses, which might enter the system directly into our prior system, and citizen online crime reporting, which we hope to achieve here in the near future. The prior system is 8 years old, and we are looking at the future of the system, when it will need to be replaced and how much that will cost. As part of our partnership with those 14 other law enforcement agencies, each agency has been contributing funds for the replacement of that system in the future, and that may be why you see some funds in this fund that will allow us to do that. That concludes my presentation for this fund, and if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Any questions on the priors fund? All right.
Okay, one more. This is our radio communications fund, and the city currently maintains 5 radio systems. Our largest system is the 800 system, which supports fire, public works, and Salem Transit. There's a UHF system, which the police department utilizes, a VHS system supporting backup fire and mutual aid with neighboring fire agencies who are on that system, a mobile data network, which is now just a backup system for the police and fire, and finally a smaller 800 system supporting coverage at the north end of the city and the Kaiser Police Department. As you may know, our police, fire, and public works field personnel rely on these systems as their primary method of communication, and this fund supports 1,800 mobile and portable radios at the present time. Objectives for the future would include complying with the 2013 FCC narrowbanding requirements, and we also want to resolve or improve our ability to communicate between Salem emergency response units. For instance, at the present time, Salem Fire cannot communicate with Salem Police, and we cannot communicate with Public Works. So that is one of the things that we will be looking for in the future. As part of that, we also need to ensure that we're able to communicate within the service area and within buildings where our personnel may be. And by that I mean we may go into basements, and we need to make sure that our communication system can communicate with our fire personnel and our police officers. We also need to replace the city's largest analog radio system, which is the Fire and Public Works 800 system, which I just commented about, which will no longer be supported by the vendor in 2013. And finally, we need to improve our ability to speak with regional first responders, not just within the city, including police, fire, EMS, transportation, and emergency management. For example, Salem Police cannot communicate with Kaiser, Marion County, or the Oregon State Police at the present time, and as they all work on different frequencies. The ability would be most important during a natural disaster, but I can tell you that on our day-to-day operations, it would also be very important. Future efforts in this fund would include a multi-year phased approach to consolidating all of our radio system, which I've discussed. We've been seeking partnerships in this area in many different areas, and what we would like to do is share resources and keep the costs down for all of those agencies. Those efforts will continue. We have some possibilities that we are exploring, and it is my belief that in the near future we will be returning to City Council with some direction that we'd like to go. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Member Bennett, and then Member Clem, and then Member Dickey.
Chief, a couple of questions. It seemed to me one or two budget sessions ago, or somewhere in there, we allocated some funds to begin, as I recall, purchasing tower locations. Did that ever come to fruition? Did that ever get going?
What we've tried to do, Mayor Bennett, is trying to place money in a fund where we can explore opportunities to do just that. That is exactly what we're going to have to do in the near future with the radio system replacement. But what we are currently trying to do is, as I said, seek those partnerships where we can share towers or share parts of the system so that we don't have to pay for the entire system. And I'd ask Director Buckles if that's correct, or maybe he could step up to the microphone.
Mark Buckles, Communications Division Director. I'm trying to think back of what you might be thinking about, Councilor. There's a couple of things we've come before Council with in the past year or two. Most recently was the opportunity that the fire department was able to receive an AFG grant, which required 20% matching, if you remember. So we were able to purchase dual band radios to assist their fleet to talk on both VHF and 800. And the radio fund was part of that. We actually funded out of the radio fund the 20% match required by the city. And those radios were purchased with both the current capacity to work on our existing system and with the ability to be upgraded to work on a future digital system. That could have been one of the items. We were probably 2 years, a year and a half back, the last request, we had upgraded core controllers to get us another 4 years before our primary 800 system would be in critical shape. That's the other one I can think of. I can't remember another item that's come up recently.
If I could, Councilor, I believe we did have discussion about the need to replace the system, and that may be what you're referring to, and that is where we were talking about we looked at about a $17 million process to replace that radio system, and that's what we were working to try and mitigate, quite frankly.
Yeah, my recollection is that it came in the context of how Owen is doing, and that we really were looking at least in discussion, we were going to be going it alone, at least regionally, if Owen didn't get off kind of dead center, which it appears to have not done.
That is
in fact, it may
correct.
be headed backwards at this point. So I'm just wondering if we are still proceeding with that concept of in this region, we may well have to find interoperability as well as the kind of antenna, and I use the word antennas because I don't know what else to call towers of some kind, in order to establish that kind of communication.
That would be, and two items we have done in the recent past. One was the work session. We spent quite a bit of time going over what our issues are, what our options are, what we'd be looking forward as far as moving the radio systems from multi-systems into a single system. And we came forward with a request for council to support a partnership with Owen. That request for us to strike a partnership with them actually didn't have any money associated with it at the time, and it did have hope and expectation that Owen would be proceeding and building out a statewide system as they originally designed. it will be lucky if they build 1/4 of what they had originally planned. Our issues were an opportunity, 3 key sites of the 7 they need right here. So our request at council to partner with them was with the hopes that they would be producing those sites, we would share with them. It doesn't look like it's going to turn out that way. And as Chief Moore had mentioned, in the near future, we will likely be coming back to council with a different partnership idea. We're looking at larger radio systems to the south and to the north that we know have to go forward to serve their communities, and how we will partner with them. Our goal in these partnerships are to share the coverage that their systems can provide in our direction or vice versa, and the core expensive equipment that it takes to run these new digital radio systems that are no longer analog. And so I think you'll see that over the next, 2 to 4 months of us coming forward with those proposals.
And Budget Committee members, you'll see on page 257 of your budget, under Radio Communications Division, Materials and Services, we have increased that amount in the proposed budget to a little over $3.5 million. We're getting to the point where we feel like we know enough about what Owen is and is not going to do, and enough about what other agencies are doing and what our needs are, that we can start allocating those funds that we've been building up, those reserves that we've been building up for a few years, so that we meet the requirement for narrow banding with the radios, and then make some progress on interoperability in this area. Okay.
Member Clem. Oops.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Linda and Chief and Director Buchholz. I just want to recap the dollar value. We started this 5 years ago. So the dollar value is $17 million, and we have 3.5 saved. Is that a characterization?
No.
How much do we have saved toward the 17?
Excuse me, we're all suffering from allergies. Our voices aren't working
This
well.
is great. It was probably, a year and a half ago, we completed the engineering of exactly what we were going to need to basically go it alone. That comment was made earlier. We were at $18.5 million. We've been able to secure some equipment so far through the fire grant and some other ways that have brought that cost down.
Right.
Ballpark of 17. We currently have just over $6 million that we have amassed in reserve funds, and our goal at this point is to bring forward a phased approach, allocate that $6 million, get some core infrastructure in place, find those partnerships. Our goal would be to take that remaining difference between $6 million and $17 million and share equipment with other agencies to the north or the south of us and bring that number down. We will still need to reach full completion down the road. We're still going to need to find either grant opportunities, or we'll simply just take longer to get there. But we do believe by 2013 we'll be able to achieve some of the key issues, like moving the police department off of the UHF system to follow through with that narrowband FCC requirement, transitioning more of fire. It's just going to end up to be pieces as we move down the road, because we just can't fund the whole thing.
We only have 2 more years to scare up $11 million in partnerships.
Well, we will.
No.
It was 2013 for FCC mandate. So what is
For the narrow banding for the radios, and Mark, you
that
can
is
talk
correct,
about
and
that.
so we will come forward within the next few months. I hate to pick a day and have you think, where was I? Because I was supposed to be here for that. We will have a proposal that will solve, in the near term, will solve the police department and the narrow banding issue. That we will be able to do within the $6 million that we have budgeted.
Okay.
We will budget it this coming year. Chances are construction and everything else from the point you approve to proceed and we get that done, it will take into the next year, but we will meet that 2013, which is Jan 1 or December 31st, 12, whichever you look at. We will not complete everything that needs to be done, but we will meet the mandate.
I don't want to find out halfway through this budget year all of a sudden we had to scare up several $1 million, Linda.
No.
That's my concern.
I understand.
Okay.
The requirement is for the narrow banding for the radios will meet that 2013 requirement. We have longer than that for the interoperability, but we wanted to do this in a way that we were moving forward with the idea of interoperability so we can achieve that bigger goal. And it's taken us a while, based on what our expectations were about what Owen was doing and what we might be able to do, to find the most cost-effective, reasonable way to move forward. And we'll bring that back to council. We have 2 or 3 different options that we can go forward with, and in a couple of months we'll bring that to you for your recommendation.
Member Dickey and then Member Clausen. And then Mayor Peterson.
I'll pass.
Member Clausen.
All right. Sorry, I might not be as prepared as I should have been, but can somebody help me to just read this? This is my first year to this as well, but I'm seeing expenses of $2 million on radios, $3 million on interoperability system upgrade. That just means it's being set aside. That's not being spent on buying radios, and that speaks to the conversation we've been having. Am I correct on that?
That's correct. So we will be prepared with the budget in the categories. We're saying to achieve what we need to do in the next year and a half, we need to be prepared to spend that. This is the dollar amount, and those are the categories that it would be spent out of. Actually, nothing will happen until we come forward to council and say, here's the plan, here's phase 1, here's what we will be looking to spend that money on, and the money is actually already budgeted in the budget, and you'll be given the go-ahead to proceed or hold tight and we won't spend the money.
Okay, that's helpful. And then, so like on the expenses, it goes from 1.2 million to 7.9 million. Where was it stored previously?
Simply in unappropriated fund balance, right.
And now it's moving into the radio services. Correct. Okay, thanks. That's all I had.
Let's see. Oh, me. Mayor Peterson.
Thank you. I'd like to say a couple of things. Thank you to Chief Moore and to Mark Buchholz for the fine work that the Communications Center has been doing. I'm aware that they are really the unseen safety net, not just for our community, but for all those others that are being served. So thank you, and thanks to them. I was reminded of the network and how far our network goes when City Manager Linda Norris was telling me in the wake of the tragedy in Japan and as the tsunami was moving across the Pacific, that indeed Salem was affected because Salem is a destination, I believe it is, for people coming from Lincoln City and the coast. And so really seamlessly, I know that our city emergency responders, city manager, others were coordinating to be ready for whatever might be needed. And I really want to say that our communication system is so vital, and I'm hoping that we can certainly find the money to be moving forward as we need to. And my second comment is that I can remember 5 years ago, and the chief will remember this, talking about when are we going to have cameras in police cars. So today we're talking about radio systems, but we're still so far behind where the nation is in equipping its law enforcement with proper equipment and proper safety devices. And believe me, though, I believe strongly those cameras are a very necessary item. And someday, and not too long from now, I'd like to see those on the list as well for equipment.
If I could make a comment, those are already in the budget for the coming year. We won't be able to equip all of our vehicles, but we imagine we'll be able to equip probably 30 of them, and we got that through a federal grant. So that is going to be a reality. If we haven't bought them yet, they're in the RFP process.
Oh, well, I'm very glad to hear that. Good.
Yeah. Any other questions for staff on budget item number 10? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Moore. We are now on to agenda item number 11, review of city services fund budget. And that's pages 247 through 276.
Yes, you are. Good evening, Chair Strozet, members of the Budget Committee. My name is Tony Mounts. I'm the Administrative Services Director. Tonight it's my pleasure to present the Fleet Services budget for 2011-12. But before I begin, I'd like to introduce Don Thompson, who's the Fleet Superintendent. So if people have any really serious questions about the fleet, he's available to answer those after I get done. So I'm going to be brief tonight, touching on some key aspects of the program, and then you can ask questions afterwards. So for the coming year, the division's proposed budget is $9.2 million. And Fleet continues to lean its operation, reducing one FTE technician position to come in at 26 FTE overall. This is down from 30 FTE about 6 years ago and 34 FTE that we had 10 years ago. Fleet revenue comes primarily from rental rates, charged operating programs that cover fuel, regular preventative maintenance and repairs, and the amortized cost of fleet replacement. Each class of vehicle has an assumed service life, and the replacement portion of the rental rates ensures funds are available when it comes to time to purchase a new vehicle. Additional revenue comes from charges to non-fleet owned equipment, primarily fire apparatus, for fuel and maintenance services. Fleet provides the following services to the organization. Fleet does acquisition and disposal of fleet equipment, working with the departments to identify the vehicles and pieces of equipment that need to be replaced each year, and then works to develop the specifications and works with contracts and purchasing to actually acquire them. Fleet utilizes state pricing agreements where possible and competitive bidding for specialized equipment. Fleet coordinates all work necessary to modify and prepare a vehicle for service. And this coming year, there's 27 vehicles and pieces of equipment that will be replaced at an estimated cost of about $1.7 million. That includes an allowance for contingency. And all this work is basically shared by the fleet superintendent and the shop supervisor. Fleet maintenance and repair supports about 1,400 pieces of equipment and vehicles in the city fleet, operating 2 shifts to allow vehicles to be serviced during periods when they're not needed for operations. Technicians perform all preventative maintenance and routine repairs, such as replacing brake pads and changing tires. Each preventative maintenance session involves about a 78-item checklist that ensures vehicles are in top working conditions. Many needed repairs are identified first during the preventative maintenance. The most frequent vehicle seen for preventative maintenance is the police patrol vehicle. These cars get driven 25 to 30,000 hard miles per year in their first 2 years and are serviced at every 5,000 miles. They'll go through a set of brake pads and rotors every 12,000 miles and a new set of tires about every 18. Almost 40% of the city's budget for unleaded fuel is used by just the vehicles in the patrol fleet. Fleet administration and fuel services supports all overall fleet management, preparing the fleet rates and the budget for the year, and then purchases and manages the fuel. Fleet maintains an asset management system that tracks all vehicles and equipment, uses it to schedule preventative maintenance and tracking all work orders. Fuel management system is integrated and allows tracking of all fuel consumed by each vehicle. Finally, the central warehouse purchases a variety of parts and supplies for city operations, principally public works. Maintaining the warehouse allows the city to get quantity discounts for regularly used items, and then we maintain an inventory of parts such as components of the city's water system that would be difficult to source rapidly if failure occurred. This chart speaks to one of Fleet's core missions, which is to ensure the availability of items, vehicles and equipment. So this is over in 2010, the average daily availability of each piece within those classes. This chart, it shows one of the things that one of the areas that has been most volatile within fleet operations over the last 4 or 5 years. We've always been experiencing the recent fuel increases, and this really shows the difference between budget and actual fuel costs over the last 6 years, and then shows projections for the balance of this year and into next. As you can see, we experienced a sharp increase in 07-08, and then our 09 budget anticipated that this trend would continue, and that didn't happen. So when we were putting together this year's budget, we basically pulled this budgeted contingency that was in the operating budget out of the line items and put it in a fund contingency. And that was, we just made that decision in January. Okay, at that point, we were budgeting fuel increases, fuel prices of about $2.77 for unleaded and $2.76 for diesel. Our most recent purchase, I think in the last week or so, was $3.51 for unleaded and $3.42 for diesel. So the dotted line basically shows where we're going to end up at the end of this year, given that price, if it holds, and then where we would end up next year. So this bar basically shows in the blue what we have budgeted in our fuel line item, and then the brown we have $600,000 in contingency. So if fuel prices just stayed at our current, what we experienced this right now, will eat into about a half of that contingency. If it goes up to that level, to 416 in unleaded and 405 for diesel, we'll burn through that entire 600,000 in contingency. So that's something that will have a direct impact on our next year's budget. And then, if this trend continues, we would show up at the budget committee or at the council with a supplemental budget request to increase to move out of contingency into that line item. So this is some of our focused accomplishments in the last year. And fleet operation has really been trying to minimize costs. And in this case, the first one, we replaced a compressor, easy for me to say, that's used for powering air tools. The existing compressor was about 15 years old. It was a rotary compressor that was on all the time, consuming the energy that it kept that running. When it failed, we replaced it with a compressor that is an on-demand compressor, so it only runs when we actually need it for operations. We'll save substantially on energy. Over this last year, we've done an oil sampling with vehicles. Essentially, we're sending out samples of oil to labs to test for particulate matter in that oil. And so that it allows us to essentially stretch out service intervals and make sure that the oil is still doing an effective job, rather than every 5,000 miles bring it in for an oil change. We're testing, in some cases, in light vehicles and pickup trucks, it's allowed us to extend that interval up to 10,000 miles. And finally, the central warehouse has been really focusing on inventory control. We had a 0.1% shrinkage of about $110 on almost $1.4 million of material turn this last year. In the coming year, we're planning 2 projects that really are working on both improving energy efficiency as well as improving conditions for the mechanics. Currently, we have 2 bays that are used for servicing large equipment. The doors don't close. That shop was built, I think, in the 50s, and the equipment in the wintertime, basically those doors have to stay open, and both increases our energy costs as well as makes conditions difficult for the mechanics. So we're going to extend 2 bays and allow those doors to close during the wintertime. And in addition, we're going to be installing ceiling fans and changing out the lighting in the shops as well as the warehouse to push heat down as well as improve the efficiency of the lighting. We are running a pilot program with the police department to see about essentially extending the service life of patrol vehicles. Right now, those have a service life of 4 years, 80,000 miles. We're looking at if we can rebuild the rear suspension principally in the driver's seat, which are the areas that get the most visible wear, and clearly the suspension affects handling for those vehicles. Then we can look at extending them to 5 years, and that would basically cut our replacement portion of the fleet rate for patrol vehicles by about 20%. And then finally, I mentioned at the beginning, we've reduced a position, and that's basically because the technology of the vehicles that we're purchasing, keeping the fleet refreshed, those service intervals are extending, technology is getting better, and so over time we're able to reduce positions through attrition. That finishes my presentation.
Member Bennett.
Thank you. Could you go back to, it's the one where you talk about shrinkage, or explain what that is? It was interesting, but I didn't know what.
Well, basically, from an inventory control standpoint, you do an inventory, you go in and account for all your inventory that's in process. Okay, so we came, on our inventory, we wound up having to, that we were unable to account for about $110 worth of inventory at that point. We had to write off an adjustment. But a 1/10 of 1% from an inventory control is very good.
Oh, okay.
Member Nenke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the section where you spoke to vehicle maintenance and repair, it says we maintain approximately 1,500 vehicles and pieces of equipment. And if I look back at permanent position recap, we have 1,189 employees. So that would lead me to ask, why do we have more vehicles potentially than employees? But it says pieces of equipment. So I'd like a kind of a breakdown between vehicles and pieces of equipment.
And I have Don jump up here if I get this wrong, but I think we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 650 vehicles, and the balance is our piece of equipment that everything from chainsaws to weed whackers to the small motor things that they're typically purchased by departments, but when they need to be serviced, they're brought into fleet. Is that about right?
Member Clem.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Page 253, Tony. I don't know if this is a comment or a question. Page 253, account code 51240. Maybe Connie can help too. This is the employer retirement PERS. Again, it's 51240.
Yes, okay.
In 910, it's 74,492. In 1112, it's over double that. I've been tracking these on all the funds, and it makes sense that it may go up. But gosh, you got one little fewer employee, and the retirement employer contribution is double that. Can somebody just get back to us later with what happened there?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. It's not a reflection on the department or the employees, but I'm concerned about the accuracy here.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any other questions for staff on fleet? Member Motley?
Yeah. Yes, sorry. Tony, can you just take a minute to tell me about the state gas tax refund as a resource? We pay a gas tax and then they give it back?
Yeah, basically we pay tax and then we get a rebate. When we purchase from the private fuelers, what we pay to the fuelers includes tax, but then we get a rebate from the state on that, since we're a government agency.
Is it a full rebate?
It's for the part that's not road use.
It's for the part that's not road use.
Okay. Do we buy our road use fuel X tax? Or are we not exempt from road use fuel tax?
I'm sorry, Member Motley. Would you repeat your question? Speak into the mic, please.
I said, do we buy our road use fuel X tax? That's the question.
We pay, when we purchase fuel, I'm sorry, Don Thompson.
Everybody
Fleet
speak
Warehouse
into the mic.
Superintendent. When we buy unleaded, we pay the state tax on unleaded fuel, and then the portion that is not used on the road, we're able to claim a rebate on it. So that comes back, and we have to reflect it as a revenue.
So we're required to pay state gasoline tax on gasoline that we use for road use.
That's correct.
And we can't get a refund of that.
No.
Can we get a dealer's license so we can buy X tax?
I would be surprised.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to continue on here for just a minute if I can. The tire carousel back on page 252 under equipment and machinery. Today we learned that $30,000, that piece of equipment is to be used for fire department only. Why would we not have the fire fund buy that then?
The fire department is in the general fund.
Yeah,
You mean, why isn't it in the fire budget?
yeah.
Oh, okay, John, do you want to?
And this is a piece of equipment that is going to be used exclusively and solely for the fire department. It's going to be placed in the fleet shops. I understand that. But the only beneficiary of the mechanical service of this piece of equipment is the fire department. Why would the fire department not buy it? Why would fleet services buy something and not when they have no benefit from it?
Mr. Thompson, do you want to explain how that works?
Yeah, I'll try.
You need to get close to the microphone.
We provide support services. Oh, I'm sorry. We provide, fleet services provides support service for the fire department, and we now have a complete set of extra tires and wheels for each piece of large apparatus, and that's so that they have a set of studded tires mounted so that they can quickly change from street tires to studded tires during cold times of the year. Fire has no place to store the tires, and so they requested that fleet find a way to store them, and we don't have any space ourselves for those large numbers, so the solution was to find a smaller footprint where we could accommodate those tires and wheels on a rotating rack.
I think the question is about how it's charged back to the fire department. Is that part of the question?
Yeah, does the fire department eventually pay for this?
Yeah.
How?
There's no mechanism planned for that to be charged back for the fire department.
Okay.
It's a question that hadn't arisen.
Okay, then let me ask my question again. Why is Fleet Services buying a piece of equipment that is only of any value to one agency? Why isn't the agency buying it?
Generally, when we, and Mr. Mounts, I don't know if you had something else you wanted to say, but generally the way the internal service funds work is that we have centralized fleet, they buy the equipment. I think there's other specialized equipment in fleet also that would be used for specialized cars and other vehicles, and then generally it's charged back. I'm not familiar with why this one isn't charged back, so Mr. Mounts, I don't know if you have information.
And at this point, the intent is obviously to use this particular one for the fire apparatus, and that's the driving force, but it would not necessarily be always used by them. But and Fleet had the available resources and made the proposal to acquire that in order to make sure that those tires were out of the weather and could be stored adequately. But at this point, all fire apparatus are acquired through bond issuance, and so we just service them on time and materials, and so there's not a rate recovery intended for this at this time.
I think Member Clem, you had something you wanted to add?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. It's pretty obvious that the question is why isn't the fire department paying for the whole tire carousel? And you're saying there's no mechanism. If I could, will any other department or any other sub-department of the city ever get value of that tire carousel?
Certainly, conceivably it would.
Okay, and so staff has presented that all departments will help pay for that carousel.
And typically, the equipment that the shop uses to service equipment is not charged directly to any department. It's recovered over the life of it through the rates.
Yeah, I'm satisfied that all departments will help pay for it.
Member Motley, did that answer your question?
not satisfactory, but I'm happy to move on. Can I ask what the uninsured motorist is on page 255?
Sure. Basically, that's a contingency for because we recharge replacement rates for new vehicles. If a vehicle that we acquire is essentially hit by an uninsured motorist and totaled, we wouldn't have any rates paid in for replacement of that vehicle. And so we budget an amount every year for contingency in the eventuality that we have a vehicle either that's recently acquired this coming year or the prior year that we would actually have to replace without having any replacement reserves in the fund.
Do you have a replacement reserve for accidents that are our fault?
Actually, for accidents that are, our policy is if an accident results as a part of a operator error, if you will, those repairs are charged to the department, or if the vehicle is totaled, it would essentially come out of the department's budget.
Thank you.
Any other questions of staff on fleet services? Thank you. Moving along to our next presentation. I think we have IT, information technology.
Good evening, Chair Strutz and Mayor Peterson, councilors, and budget committee members. I'm Ida Salazar of Information Technology and Facility Services Division. I'm here tonight to talk to you about the document services and shop facilities maintenance funds. With that, I'd like to quickly introduce Craig Cole, who is going to drive the slides, and Ty Godfrey, Division Manager for Facilities. Our budget is $1,939,450 for year 11-12. And with that, moving on to document services. This past year was a year of reorganization within the Document Services Division. Under the leadership of Susan Bloom, the team has developed processes for cross-training, improved their order process management, and significantly improved customer satisfaction. An analysis, we had many accomplishments last year, and we have a few listed up here for your review. An analysis was completed creating a criteria matrix for equipment replacement. Using this criteria matrix, 8 copiers were replaced, reducing maintenance costs by over 50% for the new copiers. Focus was also placed on improving order processing time, with one of the results being a reduction in utility bill processing costs and the implementation of a new barcode scanner, which we hope to continue to use to offset postage cost increases and improve our processes. As such, with the help of a Lean Six Sigma team, our internal billing process has dramatically improved to reduce the our internal billing process has been dramatically improved to reduce our negative department budget impact due to late billing of printing services. In closing, our 11-12 proposed budget will transfer part of the reserve balance not used to purchase a large offset printer in fiscal year 9-10. The city chose to change our business process, and we outsource most of the offset printing being done now. The fund balance transfer will total $342,690, which will be distributed to 16 different funds based upon an average usage over the last 3 years. The largest amount, $205,000, will be going directly to the general fund. A complete list of accounts designated to each fund can be found on page 269 of your budget book. Are there any questions related to document services? If not, I'll move it on to shops, facility maintenance.
Member Motley?
Yes, I see our personal services salaries, wages decreasing by $1,800 and our overtime increasing by $10,000. Is that an equal swap there, or what's happening?
I'm going to defer to Craig.
What we had, Craig Cole, the IT division manager, and reprographics falls under me, or document services. What we had last year is that we didn't budget overtime, and we recognize that that was a need because there are occasions where we do have overtime, so we wanted to have a line item in the budget this year.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to facility services, or excuse me, facility services shop maintenance fund.
Which page would that be? Page
271.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The shop's facilities maintenance fund is intended to provide a safe work environment in the shop's complex in the common areas. There are no permanent staff members for this fund. Work is provided by facility services and public works staff. The fund is supported by tenants that occupy space in the shop's complex. Each tenant pays an allotted amount based upon the square footage of space used. The services provided for these funds can be found on page 275. The participating funds and charges are as follows. General fund services is $5,000. Contracts and procurement, $370, and it goes on. That does complete the shop's facilities maintenance fund presentation. If there are any questions, I'll take them now.
Thank you Member Motley.
Yes, is there a relationship on page 276 between our electric costs and our intra-city, interdepartmental reimbursements? They're very close value-wise. Are we just changing some budgetary process, or?
The electric cost line item is actually for an audit that is going to be performed at the city shops complex. At current time, there's only one meter in that location, and we need to split it out and bill it more accurately. So there is no tie between those two line items.
Okay, so the and the 26,000 in the electric, then that's for a study?
That's for a study and an audit, yes, and to replace the meters.
Is that an in-house, or are we having a consultant do that, or?
I'm going to ask Ty Godfrey to step up and speak to that, please.
Good evening, Ty Godfrey, Facility Services Manager. The audit that we're doing out there, we have several shops buildings, 38 in the complex, and we have some upwards of half a dozen that are on a common meter, and they're in different departments. So the intent is to go out and do an audit and then separate those buildings out so we can more accurately charge the appropriate department for electricity.
We're doing that internally.
I'm sorry. To answer your question, no, we're going to contract that out.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff on this item? Thank you very much. Before we have staff presentation on self-insurance, I do have one person signed up to speak, Tom Beasley, on the self-insurance fund.
Madam Chair, I'd prefer to speak after the presentation, if you don't mind.
Okay, I'm out of order. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Budget Committee. Tonight we will be focusing on the city's self-insured program. If you recall, 2 weeks ago we focused on the human resources, which was funded 100% by the general fund. Tonight we will be reviewing the benefit side and also the risk management side. For all of the self-insured accounts, our total budget is about $30 million. We are down slightly over the prior year because we revised our workers' compensation and our liability reserve, plus we've had some savings in our property insurance. For those of you who are not familiar with what a self-insure fund is, the city pays for the first dollar losses in all of these accounts up here, which includes the vision, the dental, the liability, workers' compensation, and medical. We purchase excess insurance to cover those large dollar costs past the self-insured retention level. The premiums are developed with the assistance of experts from our consulting firm and from our finance department, and they are charged back to the departments depending upon what the allocation is, the number of employees, and the costs associated with the program. We'll go first to the benefits side of it. Our benefits budget is over $22 million. It's a large cost. Our actual claims expense is 68% of the $22 million. That's our the cost that we actually spend for every life that's enrolled in our program. We have approximately 3,600 lives. That includes the employees plus the dependents. It is a large program. We are required by law to provide a reserve to cover catastrophic losses. Our excess insurance is approximately 9% of the total cost, which is approximately $2 million. The city hires a third-party administrator to assist and adjudicate our claims. That cost is 3%. We also have other programs such as our wellness programs, life insurance, deferred compensation, and those are the other operating expenses. And of course we have the personal services, which is the 3 employees assigned to this program. Our largest cost is obviously on our medical costs. This slide just represents what has happened to our medical costs over the last 5 years. We started out at a little under $8 million, and now we're close to that $14 million cost. The dental, which is the green line, and the vision is the blue line or the purple line, I'm not sure. But as you can see, those costs are relatively stable. One of the things with, or a couple of things with the vision and the dental, they are capped. Our dental program is capped at either $1,000 per employee or per life, and our vision is capped at $250 annual cost. So you don't see those charges going up very significantly. As far as projected increases for next year, we're anticipating at least a 12% increase in the cost of our medical insurance. We're anticipating about a 2.7% increase in our dental insurance and a 1% for our vision. However, because we go on a calendar year for all of our insurances, we really won't know the effect of the full cost of the program until we get closer to September. It could be if we have a good claims year, we may not need the 12%. If we have larger claims, we may go a little higher. So as many of you know, we've had some recent legislation in terms of the federal level, the Health Care Reform Act. This became effective this January. There has been some significant program changes, and until we get 1 or 2 years into the program, we really won't know what the dollar cost is to our program. Essentially, we used to have a $2 million cap on the cost of claims. That has now been lifted. It used to be that children up to the age of 23, as long as they were full-time students, were able to participate in the plan. Now the law has changed where we have to allow all dependents up to the age of 26 to participate in the plan. And as a result, we had 144 employees, 144 new dependents added back into our program. We also have routine physicals and vision plans that we now have to pay at 100%. It used to be an 80/20, subject to a deductible. So these are some significant costs to our program. As far as major accomplishments, we had a third-party administrator. We were quite satisfied with the performance. We had difficulties in terms of claims adjusting and also getting reports from them. We have since gone into we've hired a new third-party administrator. We have also done some work through our plan design with our non-represented employees and IFF, and passing more of those costs on to the employees. And there were also labor negotiations right now with 3 of the other bargaining groups in which we're discussing the plan and design changes. I mentioned briefly about the Health Care Reform Act, so I won't spend any more time there. In terms of what we have planned for next year, I know there was a question several meetings ago about, are we looking at high deductible plans? Yes, we are. That's one of our goals for the coming year. We're also looking at increasing wellness programs and saving every bit of the dollars we possibly can. We're paying close attention now with our new TPA on our claims management review, and I mentioned and the early retiree reinsurance program is a federal program that we may be able to get additional dollars for our retirees next year, and we'll be exploring those options. With our previous third-party administrator, we weren't able to do that because he just didn't have the files and information. And we are assured by our new TPA that they will assist us through that process.
I'm sorry, Connie, could you move the mic a little closer, or you closer to the mic?
Okay, I'll try. Thank you. As far as the risk management division, I've combined both the workers' compensation and liability accounts to this chart. Our programs are our total of $8 million. The workers' compensation is about $4 million program, and our liability program is also about $4 million. We are required to purchase excess insurance, and that also includes all of our other property insurance, and I'll go over those in another slide here. Our claims reserve, we are required by law to maintain certain levels of claims in terms of reserves. Both the workers' compensation and liability claims, they take a little longer to mature. So we keep a little bit more money in the reserves just to cover the cost because of the maturity issues. And for all of our self-funded accounts, we do use actuarials to determine our reserve levels too. In terms of workers' compensation, actual claims, I thought this would be interesting. This is a 2-year review of where our claims are at. As you can see, most of our claims occur in our fire department, police department, and public works, which is very common throughout the industry. All the activities in terms of the physical component are in these 3 accounts. And what we did last year with the assistance of the finance department, we took a look at the claims costs and the claim numbers, and we reallocated the dollars to that. And so you'll see in some departments, the claims cost for workers' compensation went up while others went down.
If I could just add to this one, those are also the 3 departments that have by far the most employees. So if you looked at it as a percent of claims to number of employees, there's really would not be that much difference.
Right. We average between 100 and 125 claims per year, too, in all departments. As far as the cost, as you can see, the actual cost in terms of claim paid are predominantly within the 3 departments. With fire department, they have the more serious injuries. Police department, because the nature work is also has a large number of back injuries and shoulder injuries. And of course, public works also has a number of actual claims and dollar costs. As far as liability claims, this is we average between 125 to about 200 each year. And it's kind of interesting about liability claims because it's really weather dependent. We get a lot more claims when we have our ice and snowstorms. And you can see in 2004 and 2006, we probably had some pretty severe storms. And we have trees falling on cars, etc. So this year, knock on wood, we're doing relatively well as far as the actual claims that we've received. Of course, we still have a couple months left, but overall, we're doing good in terms of actual claims. In terms of dollars, in terms of where those costs are allocated to, please, just because of the nature of the work that they do, we do get a lot of costs associated with claims. Our public works, because the streets, the sewers, the parks, we have a larger number of claims that cost us a little bit more. Fire is only 5%. UD is urban development, obviously IT, city manager's office, administrative service, HR, and community services, very small. As far as excess insurance premiums, we do purchase excess insurance. Our property insurance covers close to $460 million worth of property. This also includes our rolling stock for our fire trucks. Our police cars are also covered under the property insurance too, with a $5,000 deductible. We purchased the excess liability, excess workers' compensation. We do have aviation that's going up a little bit because of the air. We have crime policy for city employees that may not be, there may be some losses there. Then the NFIP is our flood loss insurance, and we have a volunteer insurance programs. We purchase insurance for storage tanks and also for our bomb squads. As far as accomplishments in the workers' comp, we've been our new risk manager, who is Ed Fisher. He has a great amount of experience in terms of excess insurance, and when he came on board, he was very energetic. We initiated a workers' compensation review on actual claims, and we also included the liability. We've gone out for bid, and we are in the process of going to a new third-party workers' compensation. We have a third-party workers' compensation administrator, I should say. We have a really active program. We go out to the state to recover our workers' compensation losses. There is a fund that we can petition to cover some of our losses, and we've obtained about $120,000. We also have an active property damage. We go out, for people that damage city property, we go out and actively solicit input and money from them to replace damaged goods. That has increased to $206,000. We've done a lot of training in the safety component of it. Unemployment insurance is down this year. If you recall, several years ago, we laid off more employees. We were at about $500,000. We've now gone down to about $300,000. Our new risk manager has also done a complete inventory of all of our property and our excess insurance, and we've been able to make some significant reductions in that area as well. As far as what we plan to do in the future, we want to reduce those costs even more. Obviously, we want to put together a new accident review committee. We want to contain our workers' compensation, and we also would like to reduce our legal expenses too for the program. And that concludes my presentation. If there's any questions.
We'll take public testimony and then we'll have questions for staff. Tom Beasley. I got you in the right order this time.
Madam Chairman, Budget Committee members, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Tom Beasley and I live in Ward 3. I have some illustrations I left for you that I would like to defer to the question period rather than address them just now, but they relate to the main topic I want to discuss, and that is the increasing cost and the rate of that increase for personnel services. So tonight I'd like you to turn to pages 282, 286, and 290, which in fact speak to the medical, vision, and dental plans that the Human Resources head just spoke to. You'll note first on page 282, the budget for 10-11. I want you to focus on the employee contributions to that medical plan and the employer contributions. The medical plan in that time period, the employees contributed $310,000. The shareholders of the corporation contributed $13,579,860. In the proposed budget, the employee contribution drops to $272,730, and the shareholders' cost rises to $14,184,410. If you look at the vision costs, you see exactly the same trends. In 2010, employees paid $1,900. Shareholders paid $378,700, and for the dental costs, the employees paid $7,460, and the shareholders paid $1,493,630. All of that in 2010-11. In the present budget for vision, the costs go from $1,900 to $1,560 paid by the employees. It drops, and the shareholder costs go up to $393,300. The dental cost for the employee payment drops to $7,030, and the shareholders pay $1,572,740. You add those things up, the shareholder costs under the medical plans provided increases $698,260, and the employee cost decreases $38,040. Those figures are moving in exactly the wrong directions. They cannot continue to do that. It's interesting to hear Mr. Mount say that he may run through $600,000 worth of gasoline by the end of this year and come back for more money. The difference between the medical plans of 2010 and 2011 and 12 is $698,260. I put it to you that it's long past time to start thinking about a large employee contribution to their medical plans.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Any questions for Mr. Beasley? Thank you.
Questions for staff?
Do we have questions for staff? Okay, Mr. Motley?
If you can go back a couple of slides here, I don't know what an EAIP is. And that was a prominent acronym back here. And the third spot down, recovered wages and equipment from EAIP.
That is the, excuse me. It's the state acronym for Employee Reimbursement Program for Workers' Compensation Losses. So we bill the state for equipment that's needed for injured workers and also time loss that an injured worker. So that's the state acronym for employee. It has to do with the workers' compensation and the employee and the state.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff on the self-insurance fund? Member George and then Member
Yeah, it
Motley.
kind of goes a little bit to what Mr. Beasley is saying. I guess I have a question. Is the amount of employee contribution determined by, is it determined by a union, by basically union negotiation? So it's not something arbitrarily decided by the city, but it is apparently part of the union negotiation that the city, of course, is a part of, right?
Yes.
Because I've seen my own particular costs go up year after year after year. You know, my contribution has gone up significantly. You know, I'm retired, but I'm still getting it being increased, as is everybody else, almost in the public sector. You know, or excuse me, in the private sector. And I mean, and so that's a question. I have a question too about, you know, at what point can we continue to bear that amount? And I just wondered when yes, you answered my question. It is a part of the union.
It is part of labor negotiations, yes, sir.
Right.
We have, for our non-represented employees, I think about last January, they started, or this January of this year, of 2011, their deductible went up, and so the amount of out-of-pocket they pay went up. We have negotiated that with the fire union, and we're currently in negotiations with the police union, the communication workers at 911, and with AFSCME.
Correct.
And hope to achieve that same change with them.
A follow-up. So the 12% increase that we said we'll probably see next year will bear that cost too, because it's not a part of a union negotiation upcoming?
If we get the 3 contracts resolved, there'll be more out-of-pocket expenses paid by the employee, so that will help offset any additional charges.
So it'll reduce the claims costs. The 12% takes that into account, as well as what the increased costs are just the increased costs of medical care. You know, doctors cost more, pharmacy, drugs cost more, all of those issues. It's the same thing you see as a retiree of why your rates are going up every year. We thought this year our rates were going to go up. Do you remember, Connie, was it about 16%?
Right, and we ended up closer to 6%.
But we're able to keep it down to about a little over 6%. So we watch that very closely. It is a huge expense. We try to do what we can to reduce the cost of medical care, but the amount the employees pay and the deductibles are part of the union negotiations.
Okay, thank you.
Member Motley and then Member Clausen.
Yeah, can you tell me you haven't apparently had a need for legal or court services previously, and you're projecting one now. Can you tell me what's happening there?
Yes, several years ago we had budgeted legal money for expert legal assistance. our legal staff, while they're wonderful attorneys, they don't specialize in benefit law. And with the changes in the federal legislation, to make sure our plan is up to the legal requirements, we need to have an outside attorney with expertise in that law look at our plan documents and review our plan design to ensure that we're legally appropriate.
Okay, thank you. I will have another question later.
You said you have another question?
I said I will, but I see where Councilor Dickey was interested in.
No, it's Member Clausen is in line.
Whatever, I'm just trying to open up some space for people.
Okay, Member.
Go ahead.
After you. Go ahead.
Okay, can I ask, what's the nature of the $6,000, I'm looking at page 287, $6,000 of the Employee Assistance Program to vision, and the $7,500 and the Employee Assistance Program to dental? My understanding is employee assistance programs are mental, psychological, et cetera, and I'm trying to envision why someone would need counseling regarding their vision.
It's how we disperse our the allocation. EAP is not necessarily just mental or physically related. There's also legal services, but it all comes out of the same pot. It's just how we disperse the allocation, and it's the way we've dispersed it. We can certainly take a look at it for future years, but whether it comes out of the medical or whether it comes out of dental, it will all come out of one pot. It's just how we've allocated it.
I think, Member Motley, it would make more sense to have it all show up in the medical. Again, it's all in one fund, and so the amount doesn't change, the budget amount doesn't change, but it probably would make more sense to have it all come out of medical.
I agree. It certainly would not obfuscate what we're paying for the Employee Assistance Program, as this appears to do. And I had the same question about the wellness program regarding vision. Not particularly dental or medical, I understand that, but I don't know how our wellness program would be aimed at vision unless we encourage our employees to eat a lot of carrots.
This is, I think, the way it's been budgeted for a few years, and actually, I think we all got used to it. And when you asked the question at noon today, it made us wonder why we do it this way. So it doesn't change the overall amount to the budget, but we can certainly, if the Budget Committee would like us to do that, do an errata so that it all comes out of the medical account.
I would like to move to do that.
Sure.
I'd like to move to have this these expenses shown in medical.
I'd second that.
Yeah. It's been moved and seconded to, would you restate your motion into the mic, please?
Yes, I'd like to I move that the Employee Assistance Program expenses on the self-insurance fund all be shown under medical rather than allocated across medical, vision, and dental. And I'd like to move that the wellness program, same motion, $5,000 of the wellness program and vision be reallocated back to medical, so as to not hide or to otherwise to help show us what our true costs are. We're not looking all over the place to find out what we're spending for these benefit programs. That's my motion.
Is that the second?
Yeah.
All right. It was moved by Member Motley and seconded by Member Clausen. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Member Clausen?
Just a quick kind of big picture question for you. I kind of did some math actually before I was looking at Tom Beasley's presentation, and I was looking more at cost per employee for what our medical, dental, and insurance costs, and we go from 07, 08, $10,500 per employee annually to this year $18,500 per employee for medical, dental, and vision. What do you contribute the leading causes to that increased cost to us too. I can come up with increased medical expenses off my head, state mandates, which that obviously is a big thing. Are other things inflation and the employee contributions not matching? I don't even know.
What is also driving behind the scenes is we've had a large number of claims that has hit our excess insurance. And so we've seen a large increase in our excess insurance because claims that exceed $150,000 immediately kick into the excess insurance. So where our excess insurance 3 or 4 years ago was less than $1 million, now we're looking at close to $2 million. That's a huge cost. And we average around 6 to 7 that go over into our excess, but several years ago we were over 11 to 12 employees.
So as follow-up to that, if I may, is that kind of a random thing? Do we expect that to keep rolling forward, or do we expect maybe in future years that these costs might come back a little bit?
It's really hard to predict the illness of an employee. Those claims that were in excess were transplants, there were premature babies. We had a large number of cancer claims that subsequently left, in death. We also have an aging workforce. If you look at our population, we have an older workforce, and then we're also required by law to cover our retirees. Even though we may charge them $1,000 a month, that by no way that covers the cost of the insurance for them.
Okay, thank you.
Member Clem?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Connie, along the same lines that Member Clausen was asking, to the points that Mr. Beasley made on page 282, we're seeing employee contributions dropping 12%, but we're seeing employer contributions jumping up 4%. Is that assuming that a certain certain dollar amounts will be reserved that will hit targets in our negotiations with the labor unions?
This is at current. No, it does not include that yet.
Okay, so it does not include. So it could change.
It could change, yes, sir.
Okay. And just because the employees drop, does that necessarily mean that the employer picked up those costs?
No, I think
that's the point I got to get straight.
I think we had less employees as well. I think we've had a reduction in the number of employees.
How many over the last 2 years? I mean, 1 year was 66 and the other year was 40.
This current year, I would like to come back with an answer so we can respond to your questions in writing, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the point that he's getting at, that there's a fair share problem here, that the employer is picking up where the employees were before, and I'm not sure that's the case given all the things all the dynamics that are happening at the same time with regard to medical costs. So.
In terms of the number of employees, you can see on page 312, the number of employees we had in the 10-11 budget were 1,196. In 11-12, it's 1,189. So the amount that the employees pay is based on, except for non-represented on the union contracts, and that council has seen, and then we're increasing the deductibles. We haven't finished negotiating with 3 unions yet, and so those numbers the contributions can increase over the next year. Also, these are budgeted numbers and not actual numbers, and so what happens over the year can be different than these.
Sure, if we could just get some sort of an explanation of what's all happening, what could happen, that would be, not big, just simple.
Be happy to.
Member Dickey?
Thanks. I have a couple questions regarding employee contributions, and maybe it's different with each contract, but when our employees do contribute to their premiums, is it generally a fixed dollar amount or a percentage of their salary?
We have fixed dollar amounts.
Okay, so someone making $20,000 a year would pay the same as someone making $75,000 a year?
Yes.
Okay. And then my other question is, regarding the wellness program, we have $5,000 budgeted for that. Do you have any idea what the rate of return or savings is for every dollar spent on that?
That's an excellent question, and we have been looking for that. We really have no statistics to show what the rate of return is. even as we've talked to our consultants, what's the national? There may be some, anytime you talk about preventative things and going and having your cholesterol checked and those types of things, to tie it into, what dollar savings that is to a program, it's very difficult to estimate.
It's hard to measure what you prevented, and so it makes it very difficult to be able to do that kind of return on investment.
Any other questions for staff on self-insurance? Member Motley?
Yes, two quick ones. Page 302, what is an agent of record?
That is our broker, our consultant that we use for our health insurance. It's Mercer, and they assist us with developing our premiums and our actuarial. So it's our actual broker. It's our agent of record.
Okay, so this is their fee.
Correct.
It's not like a permit or something.
No.
Okay. And the $25,000 for flu shots, just above that, are those flu shots required as a part of some labor agreement?
No, that's a benefit the city provides, and we do that so, our employees stay healthy and stay at work, and so we provide flu shots on a voluntary basis to the employees who would like one.
For free?
Yes.
Wow.
The state also does this, too. The state provides free flu shots. Marion County also. It's very common practice.
Any other questions on self-insurance? If not, we could move along to building and safety. We have two more funds to get through tonight.
Good evening, Chair Strauss, councilors, committee members. I am your Community Development Director, Vicki Harden-Woods, and I'm here to talk tonight about one division of the Community Development Department, the Building and Safety Division. I hope that it's hard to be the second to last presentation after 3 hours and be engaging and informative. So I'm going to do my best to be short and informative tonight. And I hope that by the time we get done with this budget tonight, you have some confidence that we managed the budget well and are making wise decisions in regard to it. The budget for this division, the expenditure budget for this division, is actually reduced by 16% this year. And in fact, over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, we've reduced the number of employees in the division by almost half. This is a service that's provided by the city that is probably most closely tied to economic activity. And so as we have seen the recession hit, we have seen an impact on our ability to provide services, and we've had less demand for that service as well. And we try to do a very careful job of balancing delivering good service to people, but managing within the revenue that we're able to receive. And so I want to demonstrate to you before we get done that we do that well. But before I get there, I would like to talk just a little bit about what we do in the department. So we staff the Permit Application Center. The Permit Application Center is where you go to get licenses and permits for the city. So if you want a taxi cab license, you're going to come to our Permit Application Center. If you want to be a pawnbroker, a junk dealer, a street vendor, mobile food unit, liquor license, they all go through the Permit Application Center. It's the main place in the city you go to get permits, building permits, planning permits, any other kinds of permits. We also, by far the largest part of the service delivery that we do is the building permit program. That includes plan review and inspection services. So we review building plans, then we send inspectors out there to make sure they're constructed consistent with those plans. And then finally, we have a project coordination program, a small program, and that is where we require large projects to pay a fee to have a coordinator who helps to coordinate all the services that, or all the different disciplines that have to review getting permits issued by the city. It's a very popular program and generally saves way more money than it costs an applicant to participate in it. I also want to talk a little bit about what we've done this last year. We made a big splash by updating our computer software, which means that we basically have a higher online presence. So it's easier, and this is thanks to the IT department who did a lot of work for us trying to get this put together. But we have made it much easier for people to get information about permits online. Current information, what's going on, what's the status, what kind of comments are being made are all available online to applicants and to neighborhood associations and people who are trying to find out information about activity that's going on in the city. That has increased our online activity by threefold, and it's also reduced our calls coming into the department because now they're going online to check rather than calling and talking to a reduced staff at the Permit Application Center. The other thing that I'm proud to say is we have a ranking or a rating of 2 on a scale of 1 to 10 by the International Organization for Standardization, and that is an organization that rates building code effectiveness on a grading schedule. And what it means is that we have safer buildings, we're less likely to have damage, we have lower insured losses, and what that means for members of the community is that they pay lower home insurance prices because we have this ranking of 2. And the 2 is in the top 2 percentile in the country. So we have a very fine service that we deliver here. And finally, perhaps the highest profile thing we've ever done is the Extreme Home Makeover. That was, you can imagine that when the glory of that show is how quickly they get things done. Well, you know what? We have to do our job really quickly to make that happen too. So we have to pack all the inspections, we have to do the plan review on a secret project and get it done and have everything ready, and we were very successful in making that happen. We got very positive feedback from the production company saying they wanted to take our staff with them across the country so they could get that kind of feedback, and we came out with a project that was a benefit to the community and was also code compliant. So let me talk about what's going on as far as the activity in the department. So our budget has been reduced by 16% this year, and we are next year, and we actually have started to implement that already, and we've done that by reducing our staff levels this year. Once again, this is the 3rd round of staff levels that we've had to do. And so here are the things that we measure to figure out how to do that and how to do it well. First of all, activity. So these 2 charts show you the number of permits. You can see that they kind of peaked and then they've been down and they've stayed pretty low now for the past few years. But it's not only about the number of permits, it's also about the kind of permits that you get, and that's reflected in the revenue and expenditures. Cindy, if you could go to the next one. So this chart shows expenditures in the department as compared to revenue from permits. So there are 2 things I want you to notice about this chart. One of them is that revenue can be very volatile. So you see that peak there in 09-10. The reason that went up, it's not because the economy was picking up dramatically, it's because the state hospital came in for permits during that time frame. So we got a big permit application that brought in quite a bit of revenue, but you know what? It also produces a lot of work. And that work isn't just in that 1 year. It's not done yet. We still are doing the work that that money paid for now because we're doing the inspections that are tied to that building permit that was issued. And the other thing I want you to see from this chart is trying to balance revenue versus expenditure. So what you can see there is that our revenues have been below our expenditures for the most part over the last few years, which means we've been drawing down our reserve over time. We project that that will likely continue over time, and we'll have to watch that and manage it very closely. And that's what we do. And so after looking at this, the next slide, we decided that we needed to reduce the Building and Safety Fund by 3.5 employees. We implemented that in March of this year. We did that by overlapping work schedules and some cross-training, and so we had to make cuts because our revenues are down and the workload is down too. So we made that decision, and we've done very well in making those decisions. Many building departments around the country have had to look toward general fund in order to be subsidized during these hard times. We have not had to do that, and we don't anticipate having to do that either. And so here are the kinds of things we look at. I want to give you an illustration of the kind of tracking we do in order to figure out if we've got the right balance of staffing. So this is just an example of a couple of them. One is plans, how many plans we do. So the average number of plan reviews that we can do by employee per day, and the other one is inspections by employee per day. So we try to keep that balanced. We know that about 1.5 to 2 plans by plans examiner is about right. And you can see that we've tried to keep that as level as we can with the up and down demands. And when you can see what happened when we made the adjustment this last March, because prior to that we were kind of low, 1.63 plans per FTE, but when we made the adjustment, we're back up to 2. And the same thing then on the inspection side. We made an adjustment, we got it closer to normal. We've been doing that over the years as much as we can, but we watch these numbers very closely. And we also watch our service delivery numbers. Do we have to refund money because of our 10-day turnaround? We promise people if you bring in a single-family permit, you'll get it in 10 days. Have we had to do that? We try to make certain review periods for commercial and industrial development. We watch that to make sure we're able to deliver service at that level. And so what we're looking for into the future is to continue that close monitoring. We want to maintain the levels of service that we have now so that we can be accountable to our customers. We think that that's the most important thing that we do. So we watch that service that we deliver, and we're going to watch and monitor what's happening, and then we'll make adjustments as necessary. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you.
Was I short and engaging?
Yes, you helped counter the antihistamine I took my allergy. Before we have questions for staff, we have one member of the public who has waited very patiently, Mike Erdman.
I think if nothing else I'd rather do on a Wednesday night than sit down here for 3 hours waiting to speak to Budget Committee. I'm sure all of you feel the same way. Mike Erdman with the Home Builders Association of Marion and Polk Counties. We represent about 700 member contractors and others here in the greater Salem area. And I want to take this opportunity, frankly, just to communicate our support for the budget proposal and the way that the division's finances have been managed through some pretty extraordinary times for our industry, which by extension, of course, impacts this element of the city. The budget here, of course, is very unique from the rest of the city because it's entirely fee-driven. It's entirely paid for by the fees that our members pay, other builders as well. Of course, there's no general fund money, and so, as you might understand, we take great interest in making sure that the department has been managed properly. For us, it's a matter of striking the right balance between the level of service that we receive and the fees that we pay. We have no interest, of course, in paying unnecessarily high fees, to have more folks than what are needed, but at the same time it's very important for us that we get a certain level of service that doesn't delay projects, because if you can't get an inspection in a timely fashion or you can't get your plans turned around in a timely fashion, that costs money through the delays. So it's both of those are very important. We're comfortable that especially the personnel side, that the finances of the Building and Safety Division have been managed quite well as we've gone through the recession. As Vicki indicated, of course, they've gone from, I think, 38 FTE back in 06-07 down to 18.5 now. What I think is really unique from what we've seen from the Building and Safety Division is the accountability that they have really worked hard to develop between industry and the city. And I've seen no other building and safety department in the state that does this, whereas they do the tracking, as Vicki indicated, where they're able to kind of break down the type of employee and show how many plans reviews are done every day or every month by the intake folks, and how many inspections are done on a daily basis by the inspectors. We don't see other cities that do that. And maybe just as importantly, there's accountability there. They seek us out, and we have routine meetings where they'll come in, they'll show us those numbers and lay them out and solicit the feedback from us as to how those service levels are performing. And as a result, I think it's really generated a high degree of trust between the industry and the way the Building and Safety Division is being managed. And I think what's very important about that is that we're comfortable in the way it runs. If you look at other cities around the state, I won't mention names, but we've got cities that haven't managed very well. And as a result, they've either had to cut service levels, where builders will have to wait, a day or 2 days or 3 days to get an inspection, or what we've seen in many cases is they've had to raise fees pretty substantially in order to try and maintain service levels. And what's really unique, I think, about the city of Salem is that you look at the permit fees that are charged, and not only do we get the great accountability, but the fees are, if they're not at the bottom of any similar size city in the state, they're right there with them. You look at the charts, and they're substantially below what others are charging. I think the important thing to note as well is that while obviously we want to make sure that we're not overstaffed, we want to make sure that we're not understaffed as well, because when you start cutting too low, it's going to impact service. And as an example, I think we're at two electrical inspectors, 2 plumbing inspectors, and 2 structural mechanical inspectors. Well, that works well, even though you're getting thin at that point. But if you've got somebody that's sick, or maybe they're on vacation, you've got somebody who can back that up. If we get below the number of inspectors that we've got right now, hey, somebody's out sick or somebody's on vacation, you may not get an inspection that day, and it may be a delay, and that's very costly for our folks. So we're very comfortable with the way the department has managed the finances. I think it's a shining example. We wish that other building departments around the state could model a lot of what Salem is doing, and so we just want to be here to communicate our support for the way it's taking place, and I'll leave it at that. The light's on.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Erdman? Member Dickey?
Thanks for coming down and waiting for so long. And it's nice to actually see you. Your name comes across my email from time to time, so it's nice to put a face with the name. And I just want to thank you for your feedback, because as the end user of our product, we don't often get a lot of positive feedback. So really appreciate that. It really helps to know that this actually is working out there in the real world beyond just a PowerPoint presentation. So thanks.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right. Thank you, Mr. Erdman. Now, do we have questions for staff on the Building and Safety Fund? Mr. Motley? Okay, Member Motley?
Just one. Page 211, the $25,000 that we pay out for imaging services for building plans, are those billed back to the applicant, or why don't they have to provide the plans that we want to use as a part of their package or whatever?
Let me ask Tom Phillips, he's our building administrator, to respond to that question, if I may. I forgot to introduce Tom, our building official and administrator.
Thank you.
Jeff Starkey, our primary financial guru for the division, and Cindy Easterly, who is our management analyst for the department as a whole.
Could you ask that question again, please?
You bet.
I was walking up, I couldn't hear it quite.
We have, on page 211, we have $25,000 proposed for other professional services, imaging services for building plans. Is that $25,000 billed back to the proposer, the one submitting the plans? Or alternatively, why don't we require them to submit plans that are in a form that we want? In other words, why are we spending $25,000 to get copies that we can use when they should be providing them, in my opinion?
Well, that's a complex question, and I'll try to answer it for you, because there's a couple different aspects to it. The reason that we image plans is because typically the plans come in a paper form, and so we image them to archive them into our computer system so that we can archive them according to the state law. Typically, if we took plans electronically, you're right, we would not have to image them, but we don't have that ability at this time. The ability that we have is just to bring them in paper. So typically architects, engineers already do them electronically, but they bring them to us in a paper form for us to review. We mark them up and make our notes on them and review them, and then those plans, because of our marking and our approval, become part of our archiving. And so there's really no other way at this time, unless we go electronic solely, which some cities have done, there's no other way to do it at this time. We do have to image what we actually review in the comments that we make on the plan.
And the short answer, Mr. Motley, to your question is we do charge it back. It's rolled into the fees that they pay.
That's exactly what it's paid for, is by the fees, yep.
So if we did go electronic, we could lower our fees further.
Well, it certainly would lower that cost, that's for sure.
Thank you.
Member Clausen?
I just want to say kudos to your guys' department. I've worked with you guys a lot, and all of my interactions with you guys have been great. In the middle of a little remodel on a house we just bought, and it's going great. So thank you for your work.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
They'll have to refuse on their budget.
No, I pay a lot of money.
Is that it for questions for building? Okay. Public Art Fund, last but not least.
Save the smallest for last.
That's right.
And in honor of that, he's worn his artistic blue shirt.
That's right. The shirt I'm wearing is probably the most artistic thing about the presentation tonight. Madam Chair, members of the committee, it's good to see you again. I am Sean O'Day, the Deputy City Manager, and it is my pleasure to present to you the Art Fund. This is currently a small fund, but one that we hope grows over time. It is the result of the Council's public art ordinance that established a % for the arts requirement on certain construction projects, specifically a 0.5% of those construction costs go into a special fund dedicated to the purchase and maintenance of public art. You'll notice that last year we originally placed just $5,000 as a placeholder in the budget. At that time, we did not have a lot of experience to be able to project with any degree of certainty as to what the fund might look like. What you see in our current proposed budget is a budget that is slightly over $3,000, and that is based upon money that is currently started to come in during this current fiscal year, and that is reasonably projected due to the projects that we're aware of in the following fiscal year. I'll note that this is a relatively small amount, $3,000. Anticipating one of your questions, given the magnitude of capital improvements that the city does, why would the art amount be so small? And the answer to that question is that a lot of funding that we receive specifically precludes art as an expenditure. A lot of federal funds that we receive, which comprises a large part of our capital improvement budget, would be ineligible under this ordinance. In addition, other types of improvements, public works in general, pipes, streets, sidewalks, those sorts of things don't fall under the ordinance. So it's really the construction dollars that go into a building that are subject to the 0.5% requirement. The current budget complies with the statutory requirements in the city code that no more than 70% of the fund go towards acquisition, 20% towards management, and 10% towards maintenance, which is why you see the division in the line items in the fund as they exist. The Salem Public Art Commission reviewed and approved this budget for your review, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Let's see, Member Cannon? Not that I know of. Mr. Harcourt, did you have something you wanted to say?
I brought the wrong shirt.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Deputy City Manager, would you like to introduce Mr. Harcourt? Because some people here may not know who he is.
That's right. Our last remaining resident in the audience today is Mr. Harcourt, who's actually part of the city now, is the chair of the Salem Public Arts Commission.
Thank you. Any questions? Let's see, Member Cannon, and did I see another hand? Okay, Member Cannon.
No questions of staff. I have a motion if this is the appropriate time, Madam Chair.
Sure.
Item to put on the wish list, essentially transfer based upon the city manager's determination of the source of the funds, $40,000 to be added to the non-departmental public art fund. If I can get a second, I'll speak to the motion. Second. Madam Chair, members of the Budget Committee, this next year, for a period of 18 months, we will have a sculpture presentation at the Conference Center in Salem, and there is a proposal currently being presented by the public, by our art group, that will have many of these architectural sculptures outside. If we currently look at the conference center at the intersection of Trade and Commercial, which is the northeast corner, there is quite a large area. This area has two things that would be wonderful. It would be a great spot for the sculptures, and it also has a drainage problem. The drainage problem has in the past caused underground flooding to the conference center, which basically is not good. The other side of this is this is a great spot to have the sculptures displayed for the public. Much like the Medici family did for northern Italy, Salem can do for its citizens here. Concept here is to put this on the wish list and see what the city manager comes back with a source of funds and how this might be included in the city's conference center. Thank you very much.
It's been moved by Member Cannon and seconded by Member Bennett to add $40,000 to the wish list for the Public Art Fund. Yes, Member Berger?
Undesignated, that motion just says move it to the Public Art Fund, and then you talked about Conference Center and the things. I'm not sure, is the motion to designate it for something in specific or just move it to the Public Art Fund?
At this point, the motion is just to put it on the wish list.
But just to move that amount into the Public Art Fund to go to Public Art.
And we will come back at the time as to whether or not the money will be used for the public sculptures and the repair of the conference center.
Any other discussion of the motion on the floor? Member Bennett?
Thank you. I just want to underscore the motion also, or the maker of the motion was very clear to underscore, we're talking about some pretty serious repairs over around the conference center. That, I think, is one of the really important aspects of this. It's just really excellent that it can also serve as an opportunity to participate in what's going to be an exceptional art exhibit with statewide and regional, really regional implications as it relates to tourism and other visitors. This is something quite special, I think.
Member Clem?
Yes, question for City Manager Linda Norris. Would the TOT funds, because this is supporting tourism, and our conference center be the appropriate fund source, or?
I believe the best places would be to look at the gain loss reserve, which would be the capital expenditures for the conference center, which is where we would take money for the repairs. And then we have some money that we're carrying over in this budget that was allocated for Vision 2020, and a part of that money was for arts and culture in the center of town. And so I think part of it could come from those amounts. Both of them would be eligible for that.
Yeah, I would feel more comfortable, depending on what you come back with, understanding that we had set aside money just for these sorts of purposes.
That's right.
Okay, yeah.
The Vision 2020 money was for this opportunity, this type of opportunity.
And the gain loss reserve is top funds, so. Anything else?
No, the gain loss reserve is actually a separate account that the conference center is. There's money in the top fund, $300,000 every year, that goes to gain loss reserve until we build up $4 million. But that's not, I'm not talking about taking money out of the top fund.
Okay. Anything? Oh, yes.
Yes. Perhaps, thank you, perhaps for everyone's further education about this process and this exhibit, maybe either Deputy City Manager Sean O'Day, or perhaps actually, I think if Rich Harcourt could come to the podium and explain the public-private partnership that will be happening down the road to make the sculpture exhibit possible, just for clarity.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and councilors and members of the Budget Committee. I'm Rich Harcourt, and I have a dual set of hats, but not a dual set of heads at this point. I chair the Public Art Commission, and I also, until we find my replacement, I am the chair of the Oregon Artist Series Foundation. This is the private sector, nonprofit 501c3 that has put on the Mayor's Invitational exhibitions for the last 4 years. And the 5th annual exhibition, we want to do what we wanted to promise a long time ago and can do, is to bring sculpture out to the downtown area. And this project is really in 2 parts, a public, we think, and a private. And as Councilor Bennett said and Councilor Cannon, the funding that you are putting or determining right now, the funding, it would really be to make the plaza area, the sculpture plaza area, safe, drain-free, and meet all the maintenance and city requirements. The cost of bringing these sculptures in, the cost of honoraria, the cost of everything to create the exhibit would be taken care of by private funding from the Oregon Artist Series Foundation. The key to this is that we have to have the base, the foundation, the plaza itself to meet the requirements that you have in the city and also meet the requirements of being able to place the sculpture pieces there. We think this corner, that corner at Trade and Commercial, is Salem's downtown gateway, and there are tens of thousands of cars that go by that place every day, and we think that we will be on a category of Portland, Seattle, Spokane, and other cities that have put together sculpture plazas. This will be something that will be, I think, very exciting for the city, and it is a public-private adventure. We'll take care of the private costs, but we need that assurance that the foundation, the plaza, is there. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Member Clausen, were you going to speak to the motion?
It might be kind of to both. I have 2 questions. One, clarification, you meant the southwest corner, not the northeast corner. Am I correct? When you were just talking about it?
Yeah.
Yeah, southwest. Okay, that's the only place there's a plaza. So the other part of the question is, 1, can the Public Art Fund do capital maintenance or renovations? And 2, why just put $40,000 in the fund? Why not just earmark it for a specific project, if that's what this is about?
As I understand it, the motion is to put it on the wish list. We may come back next week and suggest that the gain loss reserve be directly billed for the infrastructure work that happens there and for a part of it, and that then we bill Vision 2020 money or move some of the 2020 money to the Public Art Fund for the remaining cost.
Mr. O'Day, did you have something you wanted to add before I go to Member Nanke?
I just wanted to note, based on the councilor's question, one of the peculiars about the Public Art Fund is it does have a statutory requirement that certain percentages be spent on certain activities. And so, based upon what City Manager Norris just suggested, we're likely to come back and suggest that the money reside in a different fund. But I think the intent of the motion and what we're taking away as staff is that this amount of money be set aside for a art-related purpose, and that it be represented in the budget in the appropriate place.
Member Nanke, I think I saw your hand
Yes,
up
thank
the
you, Madam
corner
Chair.
of my eye.
Just a question, because that location is the site of the future expansion potential for the conference center, would whatever would be placed there actually then have to be removed? Is there any timing for expansion of the conference center as well?
If we did, at the point that we do expand the conference center, yes, this would have to be removed, as the planters would have to be removed that are there right now, so it wouldn't change that aspect of it. The idea is to, instead of having those landscape planters, which did cause some leaking into the parking structure, that we seal those somehow and the pedestals be placed in those potentially and filled with some material So in the future, we would be needing to take out the entire thing. We don't have any plans for expansion at this point, and I wouldn't anticipate that we would for, probably within the next 8 to 10 years.
Thanks.
Member Clausen?
I think maybe just my follow-up would be, I might propose to the maker of the motion that maybe this is amended to just speak more specifically to the project and not be a generic allocation of $40,000 to the Public Art Fund, and maybe just a recommendation that we figure out a way to make this happen. I might feel more comfortable with that.
If it's an amendment, I'll certainly accept it.
Okay, so I would propose to amend the existing motion on the floor that staff be directed to, feel free to chime in if you think of it, but staff be directed to determine a source of funding for the said sculpture plaza and bring it back next week to the budget committee for consideration. There we go.
On the wish list and all second.
On the wish list for consideration. There you go.
Second.
Okay, so it's been moved by Member Clausen, seconded by Member Cannon to amend the motion. The motion was to move, it's a substitute motion?
I'd like to make that a substitute motion. That's correct.
Okay, the substitute motion is to move $40,000 to the Public Art Fund
Wish list.
Just $40,000 to the wish list, and staff to come back with a recommendation of how that would go about for that specific plaza sculpture project.
Okay, all right. Any further discussion? Oops, Member Berger?
Yeah, I think it's odd that we took $100,000 away potentially from maintenance at Bush Park and many of our other historic and signature projects that really are kind of the face of the city to potentially improve another signature face of the city on the same day. That kind of seems weird, taking $100,000 here and potentially adding $50,000 there. I will support the motion as a courtesy, and I'll be curious to see what staff comes back and look at it with all the other wish listed items.
I assure you, I agree with supporting those properties, and I certainly would not vote for a motion or a final resolution that didn't do that. Mayor Peterson?
Yes, I'd just like to clarify. In the Cultural Tourism Fund that we were examining earlier this evening, actually, though, the $100,000 could be at the committee and the city manager's discretion, withdrawn from a variety of activities and events, fairs, festivals, fun runs, things that are on that list for the cultural and tourism funds. So it would not necessarily take money from the funds that actually provide for park maintenance and beautification projects to those historic properties or to our gateway areas.
Yes, Member Berger?
I understand it doesn't necessarily do that, but it does have the potential to do exactly that.
Yeah.
But if there's at any point a proposal to reduce the maintenance to our historic properties, buildings or landscape, I'll be right there with you fighting on that one.
Yeah, I think that, not to make the evening too much longer, but if this body felt strongly about that, then what we need to do is to give the city manager that information now, so that when she does meet with that group, that can guide their process as they're making their decisions about that $100,000.
And I would be glad to make that motion, but we still have a motion on the floor. So is there further discussion of the motion on the floor regarding the Public Art Fund? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Okay, anything else on the Public Art Fund? Then it's time for, whoops, yes, that's right, before we had the motion on the floor, I had you down. Member Motley?
I just had a comment/question for Mr. O'Day. I confess to not having Oxford's Unabridged, but I could not find deaccessioning, good God, I can't even say it, in my Webster's. Help me out.
Happy to.
Is that something that we should be doing in private, or?
Not at all. Chair, members of the committee, deaccessioning is the term of art that is used to basically take art out of a collection. So should we ever surplus art, or if it become in such a state of disrepair that it no longer has artistic value, then deaccessioning is the act of taking it out of the collection. And under the Public Art Ordinance, that is within the purview of the Salem Public Arts Commission. And they make that call. I'm sorry?
Kind of like decommissioning?
Very much like decommissioning. Yep, deaccessioning is the artistic world's term for decommissioning.
Believe it or not, that's a common term in the industry. As an old museum person, I know that one. Anything else on public art? Under other business, I would make a motion that that staff, when they come back with recommendations, whether it's to the budget committee or the city council, but I can't do anything about city council, that not include reducing TOT funding that maintains historic buildings or historic landscape. Yes. Go ahead.
If you could, if I could suggest that your motion be changed to not reduce the projects, because one of the things I want to do is talk to facilities to see if the projects can continue, but if there might be any possible savings because from contingencies or other things for those individual projects. So we would keep the projects, but there might be some reduction in cost.
I'll speak to that, but let others go first. So Cannon's going to say.
Yeah, I don't have a second yet.
Yes, you do.
anyhow.
Yes, Diana did before.
Oh, okay, so there is a motion on the floor, moved and seconded, and then Member Bennett had his hand up first, I think.
Well, I wonder, I guess my question was whether we should designate the cost centers where the money should come from, but I think from what the manager said, that would be the wrong way to go too, because there are some ways to deal with this that would allow you to go through the top budget looking for savings by moving funds around appropriately to deal with some of the cost areas in the activities of concern, like building maintenance. Is there some way, or building improvement, that could be done? And I'd hate to limit what the manager can do in finding the savings. I just would not want to see a net decrease in either building maintenance or these home maintenance or the various activities that Member Berger pointed to, park maintenance. I don't think that's the intent of what the motion, I don't think that's what was intended in the motion at all that we passed. I'm just not sure how to say it. I guess that's what I'm thinking out loud.
Member Cannon?
Yes, I think that Member Berger's point is very well taken, and it was not my intent at all to impact those particular facilities that the city of Salem has, to diminish their value or in any way limit the city's ability to maintain those wonderful facilities. My issue was just to make sure that the money was in the right category so that the city manager and the top board can go back and take a look at it.
Member Clem?
Yeah, I supported the motion to defer to the judgment of the top board and what the city manager would bring forward. At this point in time, I think it would be counterproductive to continue to put rules on how they approach that. I'm so confident that the reason we're in good cash position is because the city manager does a good job of finding savings, and starting to put any more rules on it hampers her ability to do that. So I think the intent of the Budget Committee is very clear here. I don't think any more motions are going to be productive.
Member Nenke?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to go similar location that Member Clem just went to. I mean, we could sit there and say, well, you don't take it from here, don't take it from here, potentially in there, and we'll just narrow that place down for you. It was the intention to let those people who deal with that all the time and know what they're doing bring us back a good recommendation, which I'm sure they all will. The more we put limitations on things, the more we potentially limit their ability to actually do good things that could be to the benefit of all. So I'd like to just see what they come back with. The city manager knows exactly where everybody's coming from the discussion. If it came back in opposition to that, she'd get yelled at.
Mayor Peterson?
Thank you. Well, I wouldn't want to be yelling at our city manager, and I won't do that. But I just want to take this moment to say, mindful of the deferred maintenance that so many of these properties have had over time, mindful of the way we have reduced and reduced and reduced what we're able to do in our parks and our open spaces and our entranceways. I would just want to be certain that the city manager and the top board understand that what we're trying to achieve here is to have an improvement in the quality of our cultural and historic facilities as a major goal with the top fund, and to be careful not to be stripping on that part of the budget in order to still maintain some of the other things that may not necessarily be moving us in that direction.
Member Dickey?
Thank you. I seconded this motion, and whether it passes or not, I think I felt like the intention was when this comes back to us, it will likely be coming back to City Council, and if it is a priority for the Citizen Budget Committee members as well to maintain these properties, then that's a way that you can weigh in on that officially through this motion. So either way, I mean, I think we've made the intent really clear to the city manager, but I just felt like it would be important if it is the intent of the committee to make it official.
The fact is, it's passed. Even if it passes, it's basically a non-binding resolution because the decision was pretty much punted to City Council, as I recall. So as far as the original motion on the top fund, that was to go to City Council. Member Bennett?
Can you restate that motion? What is the motion now?
The motion, I can't restate it, but I can do it. The motion was to not, was to not take the, take maintenance money from the historic properties.
Okay. I just, following up on Councilor Clem and kind of my own thoughts on it, I really think we're better off to defeat this, let the manager proceed. We are not going to let her, and she won't, take money from maintenance of those historic buildings. That's one of the intentions, clear intentions of the TOT fund, nor to remove money from parks. I think if anything, what we're looking at is trying to get some money in place for parks, not to remove money from parks. So I think she understands completely. I just think it might be limiting. I just worry we would, with this motion, limit your ability to find other funds and move them around, and it would show up as a lowering of the actual expenditure if you look just at the top dollars, but you have to look at other budgets, and you can show us how it fits together. I just wouldn't want to limit her in making that kind of really informed choice. Am I getting that right? Am I understanding?
Well, yes, I fully understand the Budget Committee's interest and City Council's interest, and it is easier if we don't have a lot of restriction going into it. In case there's 2,000 or 3,000 somewhere that we realize, yeah, that could be part of it. We continue to do the projects, we continue to maintain the structures, but as we look at that amount of money to move into contingency.
If my second would agree, I'm willing to withdraw my motion simply because, as I recall, Member Cannon's original motion was that staff wouldn't be able to come back in such a short time for it to be voted on again by the Budget Committee.
Okay.
Does the second concur? All right, thank you all. Anything else under other business? Yes, Member Nenke?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just curious, and I know we've rearranged the whole budget committee process a few times. Tonight, there was a duplicate of almost everyone who'd been here for previous budget presentations. How do we compensate those people for their time, and would it maybe not be better to break general fund in half, take everybody but police and fire, add these extra funds that they all have something to do with on the same night, so we're not taking 2 full nights of them, and then again, if they're compensated, or is it comp time, or they just here for the goodness of being not elected or appointed to this position?
Yeah, these are all, I believe everyone is salaried staff, and so we work the number of hours we need to work to do the job. We, sometimes can be flexible about hours, and so if they're here late tonight, need to take some, 2 or 3 hours at another day off, that's certainly able to do that. But it actually, I think this process has worked well from staff. I really appreciate you asking about that and being concerned about it, but our concern is that you have all the information you need, that everyone who you need to be here is here, and it makes our jobs easier, and it makes yours easier too. So I think staff is fine with the hours that this is taking.
Just if they only had to wait 3 hours and then do back-to-back presentations versus
I actually,
2 different times.
I actually, in the middle of the meeting, told some of the staff, Mark is one of them, that if you'd like to leave, you can do that now, and people want to stay and see what happens. So, yeah.
It's because we're so excited.
That is. They wanted to see what we were going to do with all that public art money.
All right, as long as we were talking about top, before we adjourn, I neglected when Kelly was giving her presentation to commend and congratulate the Cultural and Tourism Board for having such an excellent staff person. I worked with Kelly for 6 years when I was on that board, and Chuck succeeded me as chair and worked with her. She's just really incredible, so I wanted to do that. And thank you for putting up with me on my antihistamine. Anything else?
What's happening next week?
See, I don't have it. It's not on my script. Next week, which is May 11th, same time and same place. Wednesday, May 11th is the final Budget Committee meeting, and at that time we will forward a recommendation to City Council on the budget, on the full budget. So we hope to have lots of people tuning in, and you can even testify.
There'll be no noon meeting on that day.
Yes, that's right.
We all hack and slash, baby.
We are adjourned.
Bring your weapons.